questions. I apologize for being a few minutes late. I have a built-in excuse being from Western Mass, but I won't use that. It was just a couple floors up. I apologize for that, and now we are on with the show. My name is Glenn Downing. I am the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy. I am joined co-chairing the hearing by the distinguished Vice Chair on the House side, Representative Paul Brewer, Representative. So just a couple of housekeeping rules for those of you that have not had the joy of joining us at a hearing before. One, if you have written testimony, we are happy to take it. Please don't feel like you have to read your testimony to us. Two, if you could limit yourselves to 3 minutes, not because we want to limit you to 3 minutes, but because we want to make sure that everyone who has taken the time out of their day today to be here with us has the opportunity to have their say and have their say before as many people as possible. Three, we will be calling our colleagues in the legislature out of turn, not because we believe they are more important than you, but because it is a rather busy day and folks are in multiple places today, trying to be able to advocate on any number of different issues and vote on the issues that are before us here. With that, Representative, do you have any comments before we start things off?
No. Not really. There we can just get to it. It's a packed house, so let's listen.
There we go. As I said, we will take some of our colleagues out of turn, starting with Representative Sybeck first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I'm here to speak on the bill that everybody's interested in. It's House Bill 2908, an act where I look to voluntary towing. In all seriousness, this is a very simple bill. Voluntary towing. Someone is towing your car. Voluntarily, you need to have it towed. All this says is they need to be registered. You need to make sure that the person who is towing your car, A, is competent, has insurance, is qualified. So that if there's a problem, an accident, and people will testify later, will show you some of the problems, that there's recourse. I also support the other bill in terms of the towing rates, but this is a very simple bill. It doesn't create a problem. It helps to protect consumers. It's a logical bill, and I urge a favor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, any questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we'll take Senator Wolf, Macedo, and Representative Madden all together as one.
Actually, just sit between them there, just for a little more balance.
You're off to my left, yeah. Senator. Far left.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to thank you for taking us out of turn. I want to thank everybody here today for allowing us to be taken out of turn. It's going to be a long day. I think you all in this committee have already set records this session for length of committee hearings, and I think you're in for a really interesting afternoon. So again, I thank you for taking us out of turn. I'm pleased to be joined by my colleague and good friend, Senator DiMacedo from Plymouth and Barnstable District. Senator DiMacedo has represented the town of Plymouth since 1999. While he and I do not agree on every single thing, we have found a lot of common ground. I appreciate his thoughtful approach to issues in general, and especially his knowledge and understanding on the issues as related to the Pilgrim nuclear power station. And we're going to do something, I don't know if it's ever been done, we're going to do a bipartisan riff here to show how joined at the hip we are on this issue.
And I too want to thank the committee for taking us out of turn and for this distinguished committee. I'm also pleased to join my colleague Senator Wolf from the Cape and Islands. Senator Wolf is correct. We don't always agree, though we do a lot more than people might expect. And I respect and appreciate his knowledge, concern, and commitment to resolving the critical issues presented by the Pilgrim facility. Our joint appearance before this committee is meant to raise the conversation above partisan politics and address an important and extraordinary moment. On October 13th, 2015, Entergy announced their intentions to shut down the Pilgrim nuclear power station. That announcement has put the Commonwealth in a unique situation, and that is why we are here jointly appearing before this committee today. While there may be minor differences between us regarding every specific in these two bills, our goal is unified and clear. We must act now to protect the economic welfare of our citizens and partners.
Senator DiMacedo refers to this situation as unique. And it really is unique because never before in the history of the nuclear industry has a power station been put into Category 4, which is a safety rating, Category 4 by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the worst possible category, while still being allowed to operate, and then, while in Category 4, announce plans to close. This is cause for great concern for the Commonwealth. While both the bills before you, Senate Bill 1797 and Senate Bill 1798, were first discussed and drafted several years ago, they were intended to anticipate the crossroads we now face. Both emerged out of extensive conversation with industry experts, activists, and a semester-long project by Northeastern law students exploring these issues. One is intended to protect the Commonwealth if existing funds to decommission the plant are not sufficient. The other provides a strong economic incentive to remove spent fuel out of a pool above the reactor and place it in what is known as dry cask storage. That's just a quick overview. We'll leave it to a number of distinguished residents and guests representing a broad cross-section of opinion, experience, and perspective to share the details with you and the rationale for each of the bills.
Now, it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican, or an opponent or a supporter of Pilgrim, the residents of Plymouth or somewhere else in the Commonwealth, we share an urgent concern, common commitment, and a number of specific goals.
For example, we both believe we must ensure that there is adequate funding to decommission the plant. At present, Entergy has approximately $890 million set aside to do so. All estimates, including those made by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, indicate that cleanup decommissioning will cost much more than the $890 million, perhaps an additional $500 million. We believe we must protect Massachusetts taxpayers from being forced to pay that extra $500 million.
We also believe that we must create an effective incentive to move the spent fuel into dry cask storage, a cask that at some point can be transported to a permanent site. There are serious economic consequences to leaving the fuel in wet storage. We need to do everything we can to make sure that this happens as quickly as possible.
And we both believe that a 60-year timeline to decommission and clean up Pilgrim is not acceptable. Just by way of example, I have a 22-year-old daughter, and she and I were discussing it. And I said to my 22-year-old daughter, if we do this by the safe storage method, you will be 82 years old when this plant is finally and fully decommissioned. We both believe that that is not acceptable, and we need to encourage and ensure that Entergy accomplishes this work more expeditiously.
We both believe that the Pilgrim location, beyond serving as a repository for nuclear waste, can and must be redeveloped in a way that takes advantage of the transmission lines and infrastructure already in place to create a new, greener energy and good jobs in the future. We must move towards this goal quickly, including working with the Federal Department of Energy to provide the funds to do so. The Department of Energy has collected more than 30... I know. You got me. Thank you, Representative Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you pointing that out. And going back, the Department of Energy has collected more than $30 billion from the ratepayers to pay for the storage of spent fuel. Together with our local and state officials, the federal delegation, and the administration in Washington, and yes, even Entergy, we must require the Department of Energy to provide the appropriate amount of those funds to the Commonwealth and the company to do right by the people of the Commonwealth.
We also both believe that Entergy has an affirmative responsibility to help workers transition, retrain, and remain whole. We hope and expect to amend this legislation, working in tandem with your committee, to ensure that some of the fees collected by the state from Entergy's wet fuel storage will help accomplish this, while we explore the Department of Energy other ways to support this common goal. We do think that there are resources that the DOE has on a federal level that should be leveraged in order to help Entergy do this work.
And we both believe that Plymouth, as well as the surrounding communities that bear the economic impact of Pilgrim's closing, should receive the financial support from Entergy, as well as the federal sources, in addition to our state's commitment.
We both believe that the Commonwealth has the primary and absolute right to enact legislation to protect the safety of our citizens and the economic impacts associated with the plant. While the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has sole jurisdiction over the safe operation of a nuclear power plant, we have every right, indeed we have the sworn responsibility, to protect the economic and social well-being of every citizen of the Commonwealth. That was my intent in originally filing these bills. And as my colleague and friend, Senator DiMassino, noted earlier, the circumstances have dramatically changed over the past month, making these goals even more urgent.
So I want to thank my colleague and friend, Senator Wolf. I'm saying that because it's written. I'm just kidding. For allowing me to join in today. We believe that a collaborative approach, as we described, reflects the common commitment that we both share.
And I want to thank Senator DiMassino. I consider you a friend.
I know, I'm just kidding.
For your vision, Vinny, and your commitment as well. Pilgrim is not the first nuclear power plant to be decommissioned, but it most certainly will not be the last. Our example, using state authority to protect our citizens, support workers in transition, and create strong incentives to accelerate and improve the shutdown and the cleanup, can create a model for the nation. This is another opportunity for Massachusetts to step forward and show how this can be right, protecting our own citizens. I respectfully urge you to work with us to amend Senate 1797 to create a new reimbursement schedule for spent fuel fees, and then to act quickly and favorably on both of these bills. Let's get them to the floor of the Senate and House, and let's get them passed. And again, this was so much fun. I just want to keep riffing with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman. And,
Thank you very much, Representative.
Yes, Chairman, Mr. Acting Chairman, members of the committee and staff, my two Senate colleagues that I speak very highly of in the legislature here. They represent, they're my senators from my entire district. And to have them come together speaks volumes as to how important this legislation is. I'm a co-sponsor of both the bills that Senator Wolf has filed. He's filed them in the past, and this year I hope we get them done. It's more important than ever. There's a piece of me that questioned, and I think Senator Wolf brought it up a little bit when he was talking about his daughter being 92. I'm sure there'll be grandchildren involved, and there was a piece of me that said, why is this bill being heard in this committee, despite the name? Perhaps it should be heard in Family and Children's Services and Grandchildren's Services, because quite frankly, that's what we're talking about. These are our children who are going to inherit our debt, and it's not right. This will help them make their life a much better place. So with that, I once again am very proud to be represented by both these senators. They come together more often than one would think. And when they come together, we're a better Commonwealth because of it. So I appreciate them allowing me to moderate their riff. They did a terrific job. I didn't have to interrupt them once. And I'm looking forward to the next one already. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add one point. There are a lot of issues around nuclear power plants, and the issues that we're discussing today that really have to do with federal preemption issues. We have been exceedingly careful as we have crafted the bills, and as the Senator and I have come together to really put before you a bill that is doable by the Commonwealth, that avoids some of the federal preemption issues. That's been really high on our radar to make sure that we don't cross those lines. However, what I will offer you going forward is the opportunity to continue to work together to perfect these bills, to protect the citizens of the Commonwealth, while honoring and respecting the federal government's role and authority over this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you all for your testimony. Any questions for our colleagues? Seeing none, we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Well done, gentlemen.
Representative Early?
Thank you, sir. All right. Chairman Downing, Vice Chair Broder, good members of the committee, and committee staff, I thank you for hearing my testimony. It's going to be a little hard to follow the Department of Energy and all this bipartisan love, but thank you for hearing my testimony. I'm here to discuss two very important bills. House 2870, which protecting gas and electricity customers from paying for lost and unaccounted for gas, and H 2871, which requires repair of gas leaks during road construction projects. As a result of last year's gas leaks legislation, which I am proud to have initiated, we have new information we were not privy to before the law was passed. Thanks to the monitoring and reporting requirements put in place by the new law, we now not only know how many leaks the gas companies have been tracking, but where they are and how long they've been watched. This information is incredibly powerful, as I'm sure you've heard, on the local level. It has serious implications, too, statewide. We now know that there are over 25,000 known leaks in Massachusetts and plenty still unknown. In fact, the state's oldest leak, located about a mile west of the State House on Beacon Street, recently celebrated its 30th birthday. That's all in good humor, and of course there were no candles at that celebration. But that's 3 decades of needlessly emitting, and guess who's paying for all of that lost gas? We are. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that leak's been leaking, and we've been paying for it. I might also point out that the leaks do not repair themselves, they only get worse over time. According to a recent Harvard study, which I understand you've all received some testimony from the lead author of the Harvard study, about 15 billion cubic feet of natural gas is lost to leaks each year just within a 55-mile radius of Boston. Annually, that translates into $90 million just completely wasted, which is about enough energy to heat approximately 200,000 homes for the entire year. These figures are just for the greater Boston area, so the number is significantly higher statewide. It's also a huge cost to municipalities, which pay for thousands of dead trees each year that are killed by methane leaks. They remove the dead trees and plant new ones, only to have the new one die because the gas companies refuse to fix nearby leaks. And of course, there's the health burden and hidden cost to all of us through the emission of methane, a greenhouse gas that's 27 times more potent than CO2. It's estimated that gas leaks account for about 10% of our state's emissions. As we seek aggressive reductions in greenhouse gas emissions to meet our obligations under the Global Warming Solutions Act, repairing our leaky infrastructure is a painless and cost-saving place to start. For 3 sessions, I filed gas leaks bills to require the repair of all gas leaks. As the bill moved through the legislative process, it ultimately left unaddressed the grade 3 leaks, classified as not posing an explosion risk to nearby buildings. Gas companies were able to successfully shift the thrust of the bill from repair to replacement of pipes, an extremely expensive proposition for gas customers and a boon for gas utilities who actually own the 20,000 miles of pipes under our feet. Not only is it exorbitantly expensive to replace pipes, but it will take decades to do so. I completely agree that it's important to replace deteriorated cast iron and bare steel pipe, but that shouldn't be an excuse to not make necessary repairs. Unfortunately, estimates are that 90% of the gas leaks are grade 3s. Maybe more now that grade 1s and 2s are being repaired as a result of our new law. Because utility companies are able to pass the cost of lost and unaccounted for gas on to gas customers, they're not incentivized to make repairs. They have a customer for all of that gas, and it's us. What makes that logic so outrageous is that if the state were to undertake fixing every leak in Massachusetts, the break-even point for the cost of those repairs is significantly less than the time frame laid out in one of my bills. That's where 2870 comes in. This bill phases out over 5 years the ability of utilities to charge us for lost gas, thus creating an incentive for utilities to repair the leaks expediently, but giving them a 5-year time frame to do so. Texas and Pennsylvania have already passed similar legislation with good results. If Texas and Pennsylvania can do it, so can we. The other bill I filed is 2871 regarding gas leak repairs during road construction projects. This simply requires survey and repair of gas leaks during road construction. Opening up roads and not repairing the leaks beneath the road strikes me as being a bit like a patient going in for surgery and the surgeon ignoring a bleeding artery. House Bill 2871, and I should mention, all of these bills have a Senate partner, and we can have a bicameral hug, maybe not a bipartisan one. Senator Eldridge, and he'll speak about this a little bit in a few minutes. House Bill 2871 will strengthen the hands of municipalities who have expressed extreme frustration in trying to prevent newly paved roads from being destroyed. So the general theme is that this is all a terrible waste, and the incentives are in all the wrong places. I'm pleased to have about 50 of my colleagues and co-sponsors, and a long list of municipalities who have passed resolutions in favor. This past summer, the Boston City Council invited me to discuss this issue at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and about 200 concerned Boston residents showed up to lend their support. The council unanimously resolved their support, and many other communities followed suit. Just last night, I spoke in my own district, Swampscott Board of Selectmen. They heard me out, they asked me questions, and then they immediately voted unanimously their support. They joined Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, Newton, Arlington, Framingham, Northampton, Pittsfield, Waltham, Brookline, Lexington, and Concord. Many others are also under consideration. So at a time when utilities are pressing for new gas pipelines and claiming we need to bring in even more gas at billions in cost to ratepayers, we should be taking a step back and figuring out how to effectively use the gas we have now without needlessly wasting staggering amounts each year. Though a separate topic, I feel we should repair what we already have before we consider greenlighting new natural gas infrastructure. Thank you. Thank you for your consideration of these bills. Let's take the next step on gas leaks and keep more of the gas in the pipes. We owe it to the ratepayers and the state to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just one comment before I know people will be passionate about it, so maybe one way, maybe the other way. Just, you don't want to waste time on that.
Thank you, Chairman Downing, Vice Chair Broder, members of the Telecommunication, Utilities, and Energy Committee. Thank you very much for taking it out of turn, and I serve as the Senate sponsor of the House bills that Representative Ehrlich has just discussed, and so I'm not going to go into great detail on either bill. But I just want to say, I first want to thank Chairman Downing and this committee for taking a great step forward last session in passing natural gas leaks legislation. It was a significant step forward. And of course, from that legislation, we now know the extent of gas leaks throughout the Commonwealth because of the work that our utilities have had to do. And so I think these bills are a recognition that we need to ask more of our utilities. And it's really not only from a public safety point of view, but it's about combating climate change, given the fact that methane releases are 34 times more contributing to global warming than CO2. And also the fact that it's an issue, it's an environmental issue. We've heard from many communities where a large number of trees are dying because of these natural gas leaks. So I think it's something that I see as the next stage of combating gas leaks in Massachusetts. For the record, the bills are Senate 1767 and Senate 1768. And I'm just going to list a couple quick statistics, but a federal study commissioned by Senator Markey 2 years ago found that Massachusetts residents paid as much as $1.5 billion from 2000 to 2011 for gas that leaked and they therefore never used. That is outrageous given the fact that these leaks can be resolved fairly inexpensively and can be more aggressively through the legislation that would address road construction as well as unaccounted gas. So I appreciate the committee taking me out of turn, and I just wanted to also be on the record for a bill that deals with another issue, opposing the proposed construction of the natural gas pipeline, which, Mr. Chairman, I know you're very involved with. It's Senate 1769, an act to protect Massachusetts gas and electric ratepayers to prevent utilities from charging a tariff, tax, or fee upon consumers, upon customers, to pay for the construction of those pipelines. The district I represent could have been surrounded by these natural gas pipelines. I'm strongly opposed to expanding natural gas construction in Massachusetts, and this is one bill that would make sure that we won't get charged for that such construction. Again, thanks very much for taking me out of committee and for your leadership on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vice Chair. Chair, members of the committee. I want to thank my colleague here, Representative Ehrlich, for all of her leadership on this issue in the past. And it's brought us to where we are today, and thank the Senator as well. I'm here just to say that I talk to my kids constantly about shutting off lights and about why it's important to save energy, and it also costs us money. I want them to understand that. I can't tell them that if we forget to shut off the lights, the utility companies won't charge us for those times we forgot to shut off the lights. The idea that the utility companies can allow these gas leaks to go unrepaired and that we pay for it, I mean, one has to wonder, why aren't we doing something about this? This is very much within our ability to do something about this. And if we at all care about the idea of reducing our carbon footprint and modeling what it means to actually care for our environment and reduce our costs, I think this is a very easy path. I think the representative and the senator have given us very clear paths on how to do this. And I just think about all the other ways in which I have constituents who every day are struggling to figure out, do they have enough money to actually go buy a loaf of bread to put on their table? And that's not an exaggeration. There's a number, and you know this from your districts, there are people throughout the Commonwealth, right, that the money that they are wasting, the fact that utility companies get to profit on their reckless and irresponsible behaviors by not repairing these leaks, yet we have constituents every day who are struggling to figure out where they're going to find the pennies to put together the needs that they have for their families and are paying for this cost. I would ask us to rethink that. I would ask that this actually is recommended favorably out of committee. And it would be great if we actually had the opportunity to see what would happen when the utility companies were now held liable and responsible for the leaking gases. My guess is those would be done pretty quickly. And I think that there's been a really clear path to talk about how to repair those leaks. And we're wasting time. Every day we don't do this. I have constituents here from Cambridge, and they can attest to this. Or if you live in Arlington, you can attest to this if you're trying to drive through Cambridge. The number of roads that are opened up in our city as we are doing sewer separation work, water and sewer separation, we are wasting time by not taking advantage now of construction projects that are taking place. So I want to thank you for all of your time, and I really do hope it would be great to see this happen. And if it doesn't, we should really be talking about much more publicly with each other why it's not happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Any questions for our colleagues? Representative Pierce.
No, this is a great job. I commend you for this, and I thank you for it. We all want to see these gas leaks repaired. But of course, this will be enormously expensive. Have there been any estimates on what this will cost the average ratepayer in the way of gas?
There are estimates, and of course they vary depending on whose numbers you're using. So you have to determine what the cost of repair is, how many leaks there are. We now have more known than we knew before because we now have transparency with the number of leaks, so we can get some sense of how many leaks have to be fixed. The range is somewhere between 1 and 5 years to fix, and that's a break-even point where the cost of actually making the repairs will break even with the amount that we're paying for the lost gas.
No, but do we have an estimate of how much it'll cost the average ratepayer per month or per year?
Well, it'll actually, but somewhere between 1 and 5 years, they will actually be ahead after the repairs are made, because we are actually bearing the burden of paying for the gas.
Oh, I see. So regardless of what it costs, you expect to pay it back
Exactly.
within 1 and 5 years.
Exactly. And when you think of a leak that's been leaking for 3 decades, I mean, if that had been fixed 30 years ago,
Right.
So you can really see that the break-even analysis is a little tricky depending on whose numbers you use.
Got it.
So
Thank
it's
you.
somewhere between 1 and 5 years. Thanks.
And if I could just add, Representative, I know a few other industries where a flawed product is being delivered to people's homes. In order to fix it, if that company would be able to charge those customers extra money, they should be fixing it in the first place.
Any other questions? Representative Mott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I just want to acknowledge, boy, we really have some young testifying opportunity today. Thank you all for being here, Senator and Representative. You need to tell me that this leak has been going on, and it's our responsibility. Do we actually know where this leak is? We do.
I'm afraid so, yes. We do. We did not know in such specific terms before the bill passed last session. We now have access to the information that the gas companies have not been sharing with us. So we now know when the leak was discovered, how long it's been followed, and where it's located. And And actually, there's maps of individual communities where you can zoom in, thanks to the work of Audrey Schulman. You can zoom in on your house and see if you have a leak in your front yard. It's that granular. So yes, we now are better informed than we were last session.
So, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's seen this in the news just a couple of days ago and last week to be exact, that home are being blown up. I'm sure that's not accidental. But to that effect, last night I was at a community meeting in my district in Lowell, and that one of the young lady approached me and asked me about the gas leak. I said, I'm going to find out today. So thank you for bringing this to my attention and to all of my colleagues. Thank you, and I hope that we can rectify this. I know that I've been hearing since I was in my native, in coming to America, I heard that America is paid in gold, and now apparently it's paid in gas.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions?
Just a quick question.
Sure,
How-
Mr. Vice Chair.
How does the actual cost of the excess gas that we get recouped? How does the gas company get that money back? Because obviously it's not metered at the household size, and it's kind of built into the rate process or something like that?
Yeah, it's known as lost and unaccounted for gas, and it is part of the rate that we pay. It's just built in there. It's shortened. You'll see UFG, it's unaccounted for gas. That's what that stands for. So it is built into our rate structure.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
One more question.
I wasn't sure if approved. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, before we move on with our colleagues, I'm going to take one person out of time. Robert, for the Andrew Marsh. Andrew will be followed by Representative Cutler with a panel, Representative Mantle, and Councilor O'Malley as we work through. Andrew?
Thank you, Chairman Downing, Vice Chairman Broder. My name is Andrew Marsh, and I'm a resident of Oxford, coming to speak in favor of Senate 1758, the act relative to the protection of propane gas ratepayers. I thank Chairman Downing for his sponsorship, as well as Representative Decker for her co-sponsorship. She's still here? Thank you, Representative Decker. I proposed this measure in a different form last year with Senator Richard Moore, and I'm glad it's being refiled this session. This measure was inspired when my sister and brother-in-law's emergency propane delivery had its price hiked by nearly 20% without having any way to know what the hike was going to be until after the tank had been filled and after the receipt was delivered to their house. I thought that wasn't right, and I was afraid of what would happen to somebody who was in that same spot and wasn't financially prepared for it. One of the most relevant questions we should be asking when we discuss this legislation is how the issue at hand, spikes in propane costs, affect the working class and low-income consumers. Well, just looking at the recent winter crisis, over the course of the peak season, propane prices on average spiked to a total of 21%. To put that in perspective, the peak average was in March of last year at $3.99 a gallon. To fill a 150-gallon tank, a hike of 21% would require paying nearly $130 out of pocket to pay for the increase. Most middle-class families can only afford to put around 10% of their income into savings, and that's in the best scenario. Due to rising health care costs, housing costs, and food costs, to name a few, that percentage could easily drop. Given that the median household income is around $67,000, the average family can only put in around $560 a month in savings before taxes. An increase of 21% would wipe out nearly a quarter of that. If a consumer is part of the percentage that's living in poverty, paying that added cost would be nearly impossible. It's important to note that, as of 2014, the poverty rate in Massachusetts was 11.9%, or roughly 785,000 residents, which includes 15% of children. When taking into account additional costs like housing and food, the poverty rate hikes to 13.8%, or 910,000 residents. To put that into perspective, a household of 2 working parents and a child under those conditions makes less than $20,000 a year, or less than $500 a week. For families in poverty, rate hikes of this magnitude would push their finances further and further into the brink. Added on to the fact that these increases can come with no way of knowing what the day-to-day cost of propane will be at any given moment, this can make a bad situation worse. That's why this bill is important. It requires propane companies to post their daily propane prices on their website so that in the 21st century, every consumer can see what they could be charged and prepare for it at a moment's notice. In addition to the cost of heat, it's also important to discuss the transparency and practices of the industry in regards to how they relate to this bill. The bill also requires companies to list every fee, charge, surcharge, term, and condition clearly in the contract. The reason why this is necessary is that according to ctwatchdog.com, the propane industry is one of the least transparent energy industries in the United States. Quote, companies normally don't list their prices. They frequently won't give you a quote over the phone, and they all have different prices with different add-on charges, making comparisons impossible. End quote. This shows how the propane industry forgoes transparency in exchange for added profits, and that's not fair to the consumers who rely on propane for heat. Also, they falsely claim that owning a propane tank is more dangerous than renting one from a company. This results in only 4 to 5% of consumers actually owning and operating their own tank. If that claim was valid, then we'd be hearing more reports of propane gas tank-related accidents all over Massachusetts. But we don't hear those reports. And as a result, the industry holds a near monopoly on residential gas tanks, limiting competition and allowing them to develop rules that only allow consumers to have their tank filled by the same company that owns the tank. And last but not least, the industry is notorious for slipping in hidden fees and charges that catch consumers off guard and strain their finances even more. I'd like to point to a couple of cases in Connecticut that illustrates my point perfectly. A few years ago, in 2010, a consumer had an issue with AeroGas, which has offices in Massachusetts and Rhode Island as well, when they charged her an extra $100 for conserving propane and not using a minimum amount. Also, in 2012, a consumer had problems with AmeriGas, which has 2 offices in Massachusetts. In this case, after her propane tank was filled, the company locked the tank and then charged over $100 to come and unlock it. When she asked why, the serviceman told her that it was standard procedure for the company. The second time it happened, AmeriGas tacked on a $35 late fee to the service charge. If these conditions were listed clearly in the contract for the consumer to read before signing the dotted line, consumers would be more prepared to deal with these occurrences. Also, it could increase competition because if one customer decides they don't like the conditions in the contract, they can look for another company that will treat them better. To conclude, this bill is common sense because it will increase transparency in the propane industry so that consumers will be protected. I'd like to point out that this bill was a compromise between my original proposal from last year and the concerns that the propane industry raised. It was reported out last year nearly unanimously. It's time to pass this measure, and I urge the committee to report out without delay. Thank you, Chairman Downing. I yield.
Thank you very much for your work. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we look forward to continuing more.
Terrific job.
Thank you very much.
Next, Representative Cutler is going to bring up the panel. Again, that'll be followed by Representative Mantle and then Councilor O'Malley.
Yes, we're good. Sure, you get the copies. I want to be able to know what you're saying. Mr. Chairman, very distinguished members of the TV committee, which I'm privileged to be a member of.
Folks who keep the conversations down while someone's testifying so that they will agree with the vote. Representative.
Thank you. I'm here to register support for 2 bills, Senate 1797. I also wanted to speak to Senate 1798. For the record, my name is Representative Josh Cutler, representing communities of Duxbury, Pembroke, and Hanson. And wanted to also inform the members of my community in Duxbury, we're talking about bipartisanship. We unanimously supported a resolution at town meeting to endorse Senate 1798. The speakers to my left and to my right can do a much better job explaining why this is such an important issue. I merely wanted to make a couple points and turn it over to the experts. My concerns, 2 concerns paramount. Number 1, I'm concerned that Entergy, with lacking sufficient balance in its decommissioning fund, that one of 2 things is going to happen, potentially both. That ratepayers are going to get stuck paying the tab, number 1, whether we're going to do safety on the cheap. And those are the reasons why I think this is such an important bill to support. So I'd like to turn it over now to, I don't want to go first, but my colleague to my left. Thank you.
Chairman, members of the panel, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Bruce Taub. I'm an attorney in Orleans, Massachusetts. The purpose of 1798 is quite simple. It's namely to give the Commonwealth and its citizens a better start in dealing with this very large economic risk that the state, its cities, towns, and taxpayers will face if we have to pay for cleaning up the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station, especially if the limited liability corporation that is Pilgrim's direct owner disappears or hasn't put aside enough money to decommission Pilgrim competently and completely. To do this, 1798 requires Pilgrim's real owner, Entergy Energy Corporation, and the real owner of any commercial nuclear reactor in the Commonwealth to pay an annual $25 million post-closure funding fee. This money would be placed in a trust fund in the Office of the State Treasurer. After Pilgrim or any other commercial nuclear reactor in the Commonwealth has been completely decommissioned, any excess in the fund would be returned to the plant owner with interest. Let me put this $25 million fee in context. Pilgrim generates about $300 million of revenue every year. It has generated more than $4 billion in revenue during the 15 years since Entergy bought all of Pilgrim's land, more than 1,000 seashore acres, together with, and I quote from the deed, all building structures, fixtures, and other improvements above and below the ground in 1999 was near $10 million. According to Entergy's most recent annual report, the company's 2014 revenue was approximately $12.5 billion. That's about 13% of the Commonwealth's entire budget. There is nothing unfair or unreasonable about a $25 million annual fee to help ensure that a company which has made billions from Pilgrim, rather than the Massachusetts taxpayers, pays the cost of cleaning up after itself. Passage of 1798 is especially important now. Entergy announced in October it would close Pilgrim no later than June of 2019 and may decide to close even sooner. The cost of decommissioning and the risk that the Massachusetts citizens will have to pay for much of these decommissioning costs is no longer an issue we can kick down the road. Entergy will tell you there is no risk because it has about $900 million in its decommissioning fund, and that fund will continue to grow. But there is a risk, a significant risk, and the next speaker will tell you why.
Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for letting me speak to you this afternoon in support of Senate Bill 1798. My name is Brian Boyle. I'm a retired business executive and an MIT PhD graduate in electrical engineering. I've been studying Pilgrim Nuclear for a few years. When I saw the shortfall in Pilgrim's Decommissioning Trust Fund, I was appalled at the huge taxpayer bailout I saw coming down the road. I'd like to take a few minutes to share my findings with you. The cost of decommissioning a reactor has been going up faster than inflation. Over the past 7 years, decommissioning costs have risen 3 to 6% faster than inflation. We estimate it will cost $1.5 billion to decommission and clean up Pilgrim to get the job we're starting today. But the decommissioning trust fund balance is just $890 million. That's a shortfall of over $600 million, or over 40%. But decommissioning can't start until the trust fund has enough to fully cover all decommissioning costs and all spent fuel storage costs. Entergy also owns Vermont Yankee Nuclear. It has already taken from Vermont Yankee's fund to cover spent fuel storage costs, even before decommissioning has begun. Assuming that also happens with Pilgrim, we can expect the fund to drop further over the next decade. Let's assume that the trust fund earns even a moderate 4% return on investment, that is 2% over inflation, and that costs only grow 1.5% over inflation, just half the low end of the reported range I showed you just a second ago. And the costs only, the fund will then be 54% underfunded at the end of the decade. And then we're expected to hope that the fund grows fast enough to catch the costs before the 16-year NRC sanctioned period ends. But as you can see, it does not. Instead, the shortfall grows to about $1.7 billion in today's dollars. That could present a huge financial burden to the Massachusetts taxpayers. Senate Bill 1798 is designed to mitigate that burden and shift it to the company that made the profits. The $25 million annual fee proposed by the bill could enable the funding to catch up to the decommissioning costs in about 50 years. A much fairer outcome, for sure. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Lambert from Pilgrim Lodge. I'm going to quickly discuss 6 negative economic impacts from the situation that we're in, as just described, that Entergy does not have enough money to decommission and clean up. So what's going to happen in 2017 or 2019, either date, we'll see a closure. They will not be able to dismantle and clean up the site for decades. NRC came and spoke to some legislators here last week, and they affirmed that it will go into what's called safe or SAF store. That means it will be delayed decommissioning or mothballing the reactor because they do not have to complete decommissioning for 60 years. We'll all be dead, right? So what does that mean for the community, Plymouth, the region around it, and the Commonwealth? There are 6 negative economic impacts of delaying decommissioning way into the future until they hope, and it's only a hope, as Brian explained, that they will then have enough money. The first is that Plymouth has depended upon Pilgrim as its cash cow. There are 600 workers approximately there who own houses and shop. Also, Entergy has paid about $10 million a year to the community, not to mention the gifts. Now, in 2017, 2019, that's going to be all gone. The workforce is brought down to a skeletal crew. So it's bad news for Plymouth. However, if they had the money, and the sooner they get it from passage of this bill, then they can start decommissioning, which brings in 1,000 workers for 10 years, which is a good bridge to get out of the hole they find themselves in and the people in the region. Second, the longer it takes to clean up and decommission that site, you have an unused piece of property. A piece of property that, if cleaned and dismantled, you could use for another business, for develop taxes, workers, and stimulus for that community. Also, the longer you wait to clean up a site, you're giving an opportunity for the contaminants on that site to spread. The further they spread on site, the more it's going to cost to clean up, obviously. And you're risking spreading into Cape Cod Bay, having a negative economic impact on fisheries, on tourism, and on the property that's on the shores. In addition, the skilled workforce will disappear. They have the knowledge of where the spills are. They have the knowledge of the specifics of the site, which can mean a more efficient process. In addition, you'll find that the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, after closure, has allowed the operator to stop off-site emergency planning which will mean the state of Massachusetts will lose a pile of money, okay, for radiological emergency planning purposes, and all the communities within the 10-mile emergency planning zone. However, the Commonwealth nor the citizens in the towns are going to allow all planning of that sort to stop until the spent fuel pool certainly is empty. So that will be an unfunded economic burden hitting the local communities and the Commonwealth. In addition, we expect, as seen in other sites, that Entergy will no longer feel responsible for payment to Mass Department of Public Health for environmental testing. That again would be an unfunded burden on our community. And I hope I did it in 3 minutes.
Close enough. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next, Representative Mail.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Brian Mantle, the state representative for the 2nd Barnstable District. Before I begin testimony on H 3531, which is the bill that I filed before this committee today, I do want to add my name and my voice to the chorus of legislators and activists who support S 1797 and S 1798 in regard to the Pilgrim nuclear power plant. Thankfully, we are in a point in time now where this is is something that is not just simply aspirational, but something that we're actually forced to deal with. And I will share anecdotally that there has been an erosion of trust between the community that surrounds and is downwind from Entergy and the plant and the company itself. And that is something that I think has led Senator Wolf and our delegation to support both of these bills. At the beginning of the term, it is the tradition of the Cape and Islands legislative delegation to convene a meeting to share our legislation with our colleagues and to talk about the bills that we wish to support. During that meeting this year, Senator Wolf brought up these 2 bills specifically because of a shared frustration amongst the members of our delegation that Entergy simply, when provided with the opportunity to do the right thing, has not. And it's our hope that, specifically now that there is a projected end to the operation of the plant, that this committee will take under consideration these laws and consider for the future generations of citizens of the Commonwealth who live near this facility, that this is the right thing to do, both for our health and safety and for the future health and safety of the environment. That being said, with respect to H 3531, which is an act to examine the cost of gasoline, oil, natural gas, and electricity on Cape Cod and the islands, I will be brief, less than 2 minutes. If you drive to the Cape, you'll notice an interesting phenomenon, which is that all of a sudden things become more expensive. And this is particularly true when it comes to our energy costs: electricity, gas, natural gas, home heating fuel, and gasoline in particular. Diesel fuel, by my observation, tends to remain, for some reason, constant on both sides of the bridge. But for whatever reason, that few hundred yards that separates the mainland from the peninsula that we call home gives some justification to the companies that bring in fuel and energy to boost the price up. And it's gone on for decades and decades. We brought this up to Attorney General Martha Coakley last term and asked her office to look into it. She said, why don't we have a study on it to get some hard data? And so I filed this legislation not so that it can die and go to study, but so that there can actually be a study. This is something that could quite easily be resolved. I worked with House Counsel to define the legislation and draft it in a way that would be open and have as many voices and people who could chime in so that no interest group would be left behind. But the ultimate goal of this commission would basically be to look at the cost and understand why it is that it costs more to fill up your car, to fill up your home, heating tank, or to purchase natural gas. I don't believe that there is a solid justification. I believe that tradition has simply merited that if they will pay it, then we'll just keep charging them. And I would like to get to a point where we have enough information and data, rather than just simple folklore about the cost, so that we can actually go to the utility company or perhaps go back to the Attorney General and look at what appears to be gouging.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions? Representative Hunt?
Thank you for that, Rev Mantle. I just wanted to add 2 cents. I have a couple of pictures with respect to diesel that were taken on September 9th. One at exit 5 in Plymouth at a Shell station, and the other one taken a few minutes later down at the bridge, with a 45-cent differential in those prices, $2.75.9 in Plymouth and $3.19.9 at the bridge. And this is something, actually those pictures are something I had texted to Attorney General Maura Healey at the time, asking for help on this as well. And so I appreciate the fact that you filed the bill.
As long as that is not Senator DiMacedo's gas station.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Maddox? The councilor will be followed by a second panel on the Pilgrim issue with Deb Katz, Karen Miller, and Alex Pollock. Councilor?
Thank you very much, Chairman Downing, Vice Chair Fedor, and through you both to the members of the committee. My name is Matt O'Malley. I'm a member of the Boston City Council, and I'm the chair of the Council's Committee on Environment and Parks. I wanted to begin by thanking some incredible environmental justice and real leaders in this city and throughout this Commonwealth. Mothers Out Front and West Roxbury Saves Energy, who have helped galvanize a lot of action at the city level, and I know that it reaches throughout every city, 351 cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth. Early last year, Mothers Out Front reached out to me and some of my council colleagues to call our attention to the issue of gas leaks in the city of Boston. This is obviously an ongoing issue in the district that I represent, which primarily consists of the neighborhoods of Jamaica Plain, West Roxbury, parts of Roslindale and Roxbury, as well as the back of Mission Hill. But it affects every neighborhood in Boston and beyond. Natural gas pipeline network in Greater Boston is extensive, and it provides hot water, heat, and other amenities to a great number of people. However, parts of the system are decades old and are starting to cause serious problems throughout the city. The most immediate concern is the growing number of gas leaks in our neighborhoods. Last month, in fact, Mothers Out Front and some others held a birthday party for the oldest gas leak in the city of Boston. It's close to where we sit, and it's 30 years old. It has been an open gas leak, not fixed, for 30 years. They, of course, brought a cake, but did not bring a candle to light. Monday, September 21st, I chaired a council hearing on gas leaks. Dozens of advocates and residents testified for several hours, along with representatives of Mayor Walsh's administration, National Grid, environmental activists, residents, and elected officials, including State Senator Jamie Eldridge, State Rep. Lori Ehrlich, and two of the representatives that I closely work with, State Rep. Ed Coppinger and Liz Malia. There were 2 charges from that hearing. One was to file resolutions in support of House Bills 2870 and 2871. Those 2 resolutions passed unanimously, which is an increasingly rare feat to happen on the council for anything to pass unanimously, but we were united in that. The other was to convene a working session, which will have its first vetting this Thursday, November 19th, where we'll bring the stakeholders together from the utilities, the environmental community, and the mayor's office to feel to discuss and achieve some real results how we can take parts of these two bills and put them into action. The first bill, of course, 2870, would prevent utilities from passing on the cost of gas leaks to ratepayers. Right now, it's about $90 million a year that ratepayers are paying for. 2 other states have already passed legislation similar to this, Pennsylvania and Texas. While Massachusetts cannot be the first to do it, we can certainly be the next to do it. The other bill, 2871, is a very simple yet profound concept where it would require the repair of all gas leaks when a road is opened up for significant repair of the road or any underground utility or infrastructure. We are seeing incredible development across the city and beyond. The city of Boston has grown in population more from 2010 to 2013 than we did in the 1980s and 90s combined. You see it as you drive to this building. There is traffic. There are cranes everywhere. Things are happening. And we're opening up our roads for water and sewer, for utilities, for, in some sections, very small sections, fiber optic networking. Yet there's no real mandate to work with the utilities and say, hey, we're going to open this street up anyway. You should fix this leak. It's common sense, and it's not happening. But with your help, we can make sure that it's mandated throughout every city and town in the Commonwealth. Recent Harvard University study revealed that the number of gas leaks in Greater Boston is 2 to 3 times greater than previously thought. The most conservative estimates have it at just under 2,000 gas leaks in Boston proper. Others have argued it could be 2 or 3 times that. The amount of natural gas lost each year through these leaks is more than $90 million, and the cost is directly absorbed by the natural gas customers. Not only is there a considerable financial burden associated with these leaks, but there's obviously a large environmental concern. Methane leaked into the atmosphere is an extremely potent greenhouse gas. It's said to be 84 times more harmful than carbon dioxide during the first 20 years after ignition. Gas leaks have shown to kill trees in our parks and in our sidewalks. Then there's also the health and safety concerns. Gas leaks can at worst be harmful to human health and can exacerbate asthma and allergies. At worst, they can cause explosions. Now, some of you may know, and we're fighting this all throughout the Commonwealth. I know, Mr. Chairman, you've had to deal with this in Western Mass. There is a very large and potentially dangerous, and I would say ill-conceived, pipeline coming through southwest Boston. The West Roxbury Lateral is a 750 psi pipeline, and the only argument as to why the pipeline should be there is that because there's not enough natural gas to get to customers. Well, my God, if we can fix these leaks, if we can take this $90 million worth of gas and contain it and put even some of it into the pool of access, I think that we wouldn't need to have a major reckless pipeline be put into place. Now, it's clear that we need to grow our network and our capability of renewable energy sources like wind and solar and hydro, but we also need to fix the infrastructure. And this is something that is not only good for the environment. So if you're an environmentalist, you should support this because trees are being killed. If public health is your biggest issue, you should be supporting this because we can make sure that we lower rates of asthma and allergies. If you're a fiscal conservative, you should support this because we are protecting ratepayers and making sure that people aren't charged for what they don't use. This is good common sense legislation. The City Council unanimously supports it. We thank you all for your leadership on these and so many issues, and we urge passage of these 2 bills. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councilor. Any questions for the Council? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've been joined by Representative Peak. So before that panel, Representative Peak, if you could briefly, and then we'll go right to that panel. As mentioned earlier, Deb Katz, Claire Miller, and Alex Hall. Representative Peak.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking me out of turn. As you know, probably by the absence of your House counterpart.
You guys have something going on today?
Yeah, we're in session today with a little lifting the solar cap bill. Yeah, and it's there's only a few amendments to work our way through. So hopefully we'll get out in time for you to have your forum at 7 p.m. this evening. But to the matter at hand. Yeah, that's right. It's very close, I think, actually. Make Conference Committee. That's right. What else would we have to talk about? What I'm here to talk about, filed by my senator, Senate 1797, an act establishing a fee on the storage of spent nuclear fuel in fuels, and Senate 1798, an act establishing funding to provide monies for post-closure activities at nuclear power stations. I understand I missed the bipartisan testimony of both the gentleman from Harwich and the gentleman from Plymouth earlier.
You should watch the YouTube.
I'm sure I will.
We're going to take over for the car talk.
Exactly. I would like to echo their remarks and just, I have written testimony here. You have testimony that was submitted to you by the Cape Cod National Seashore Advisory Committee, a unanimous vote by them. I think half of Cape Cod is sitting in these benches behind me. You'll hear from them later on. This is a matter that those of us from the Cape and the islands and the greater Plymouth area have been paying attention to for years. We took a moment to rejoice when Entergy announced that they would be closing the plant, but then we started to say what's next. And part of what's next is looking at the resources they have on hand and what the total cost of a safe closure will be, not only having the money, but not extending the time period out to 60 years, which is unacceptable. As a member of the House, I hate to say this about a member of the Senate, but I think that Senator Wolf was prescient when he filed these bills. It was almost as though he had a crystal ball and could foretell the future. Seriously, what each one of these pieces of legislation provides us with is a funding source for the timely, safe, and methodical shutdown of that plant. It's one thing to say you're going to shut down, but actually seeing it through to fruition is another matter. So I would ask for your favorable consideration of it. I would ask you to look at some of our neighboring states, like Connecticut, where the cost of the shutdown has been borne by the taxpayer there. We don't want the taxpayers of the Commonwealth to keep holding the bag. These two bills provide a financing mechanism to ensure that that doesn't happen. And while I'm here, just briefly, if I could also be recorded in favor of the two bills before you today filed by Representative Ehrlich. House 2870, an act relative to protecting consumers of gas and electricity from paying for leaked and unaccounted for gas, and House 2871, an act relative to gas leak repairs during road projects. And lastly, just to be recorded in favor of Rep. Cutler's bill, a member of your committee, an act relative to public utility vegetation management, House 2863. We've been struggling with vegetative management. Boxing with people who have longer arms than ours in terms of the utility company. Electric, NSTAR, Eversource, and whatever their name may be tomorrow. We're having a tough go of it on the Cape, and any way we can get at the situation to allow our communities to have a greater say and control of their own destiny relative to vegetation management, and certainly support that. Sure. Thank you. Be happy to answer any questions people have, and if not, I'll let the panels proceed.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
On with the panel, Deb, Claire, and Alex. Come on up.
I'm going to have Claire help me with the show and tell. So, hi. I appreciate this opportunity to provide testimony. My name is Deb Katz. I'm with Citizens Awareness Network. I'm here in support of S. 1798. It's imperative that this legislation be enacted. CAN is a regional group with over 3,500 members in New England. We intervened in the NRC proceedings on the decommissioning of Yankee Row in Connecticut Yankee. We won a lawsuit against the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for the illegal decommissioning of Yankee Row. We have also consulted with the state of Vermont to address the issues of closure and decommissioning of Vermont Yankee. CAN, in coalition with other groups, including Nuclear Information Resource Service and Pilgrim Watch, submitted a petition to the NRC to seek investigation of Entergy's financial vulnerability of its 3 Northeast nukes, which included Pilgrim, Vermont Yankee, and Fitzpatrick in New York. We were concerned that Entergy's financial instability could undermine the operation and cleanup of these reactors. These concerns were based on UBS reports that predicted significant financial shortfalls. UBS estimated that each would lose more than $120 million in the next 3 years. This has proved accurate, if not conservative. In fact, Vermont Yankee was estimated to lose $120 million. Pilgrim is expected to lose the same, and Fitzpatrick is expected to lose $80 million a year. 3 attorney generals from Vermont, New York, and Massachusetts submitted letters in support of our petition, including their own questions and concerns. The New York Attorney General submitted a diagram of Entergy's corporate structure that demonstrated a financial labyrinth. This is what he in fact submitted to the NRC, which posed serious questions about how the individual limited liability corporations, as well as the parent company, could be held responsible for any financial shortfalls. I am submitting the corporate analysis as well as our petition to the committee to take a look at. So this may speak for itself. It's relatively confounding, but as you look at it, it gets more bewildering as you go along. The NRC permits nuclear corporations to maintain substantially underfunded decommissioning funds, with previous closures including Yankee Row in Massachusetts and Connecticut Yankee. These reactors were owned by utilities and had a captive rate base to return to for escalating costs. An example is Yankee Row. It cost $39 million to build Yankee Row. It cost over $700 million to clean it up. 185 megawatt reactor. It cost $1.2 billion to clean up Connecticut Yankee. It was estimated at $800 million. Connecticut Power and Light customers are still paying for the cleanup of Connecticut Yankee today. Unlike Roe and Connecticut Yankee, Entergy's merchant fleet has no rate base to return to for escalating costs. Because of inadequate decommissioning funding, as well as Entergy's parent company's refusal to subsidize the shortfalls in the fund, Entergy anticipates it will take 60 years to clean up this fleet of reactors. Will Entergy even be a corporation in 2069? The anticipated closure of Pilgrim does not eliminate the concerns raised in this legislation. If anything, its passage becomes imperative. The lessons learned from nuclear decommissioning: states must act proactively to protect themselves. This legislation is an important first step.
And before we move on to the next section, just so folks know, the House members are going to be in and out of their informal session for votes. I'm here with you for the whole time.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Claire Miller, and I'm the lead community organizer with Tax 6 Action Center. We're a regional group here in New England, and I want to testify in favor also of 1798 and share a little bit of the lessons learned from Vermont. Tax 6 Action Center is working with a coalition of citizens and other public interest groups around the issues of Vermont Yankee, and want to make sure that we know those lessons here and we can mitigate the risks, economic risks for Massachusetts. So the first thing that maybe hasn't been said, or I just want to reiterate, is that Entergy is going to try and use money that they set aside for decommissioning and dismantling the plant for things that are not part of decommissioning, such as spent fuel management costs. The NRC just approved this type of use in Vermont this month, even as the state of Vermont contested it. Secondly, in Vermont, the total cost of decommissioning studies show will exceed $1.4 billion, and yet Entergy has only set aside thus far $665 million. The NRC's regulations state that the decommissioning fund can only be used for radiological cleanup, but through a series of amendments, Entergy is dipping into that, paying for town taxes, legal fees, so on and so forth. Pilgrim is a larger site. It's obviously going to cost more than Vermont. And for me, the brilliant thing about 1798 is that it will reduce the risk to taxpayers resulting from shortage of available funds. And should Entergy manage to complete decommissioning under budget, they can get their extra money back with interest. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Alex Rapali. I'm with Clean Water Action. We're a national environmental organization with nearly 50,000 members across Massachusetts. Our members have long been concerned about various issues around nuclear power, and I'm here to speak to you in support of Senator Wilk's bill, 1798. You can see from the attendance here and from the testimony that has preceded me and will continue all through the afternoon that this issue has captured the interest of people, a broad cross-section of folks who are affected. And what happens in Massachusetts is likely going to affect what happens nationally. Natural reverberations. The transition to clean energy is accelerating, and communities hosting fossil and other toxic energy sources are going to bear the brunt of these impacts. We've already heard news of other energy plants being closed, another plant being closed in New York State, and there's likely to be others coming out of service in the coming years. The reason Massachusetts is so important is we've been seen as leaders on energy and environment, and we can again be a beacon for others grappling with the same problems. How do we make the leap to clean energy while protecting our ratepayers, local tax base, economic health, jobs, etc., all at the same time? It's not easy, but fortunately we have a highly engaged base in Massachusetts putting forward an excellent, meticulously crafted bill for your consideration. Of primary concern to our members is the need to protect taxpayers and ratepayers from the costs that they did not agree to bear. We're dealing with a very large and financially sound company, as folks have described, and that's extracted profits from Plymouth and from Massachusetts for decades. It's now time to pay back. That simple. The bill provides a reasonable fund for the set of activities needed for any property decommissioning process, including doing right by the host community, plant workers, and the environment. The very minimum that we should be requiring is for Entergy to clean up their mess as soon as possible and make the community whole again, foisting the decommissioning costs onto ratepayers and local taxpayers would be an utter failure for a responsible post-closure process. The very large site of the current plant would be unusable until it's clean, and that's a significant burden, an undue burden on this community, which could otherwise put it to good use, earning tax revenue. The faster the process you require, and then the more thorough the process, and the more diligently that Entergy takes on their duty, the easier the transition will be for everyone. So we thank you for your attention to these important matters.
Thank you all for your testimony. Next, Elena Latona, Robin Hubbard, Janet Dominance, and Diane Turco. Just so that folks waiting know, we have about 70 people signed up to testify in one form or another. So while people are respectful of you and listening to you, please be respectful of them. And 20 to 3 minutes, you can move on. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Elena Letona. I am the Executive Director of Neighbor to Neighbor Massachusetts and a lead partner in the Green Justice Coalition, GJC, a broad-based partnership of more than 50 organizations working to build a socially just and environmentally sustainable economy. We are convened by Community Labor United, and together we represent over 100,000 ratepayers throughout Massachusetts. On behalf of GJC, I want to thank both chairs of this committee, Representative Golden and Senator Downing, along with the entire Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy, for giving us the opportunity to express our support of Senate Bill 1798. GJC has been working for the past 7 years with the state and utility companies to expand access to energy efficiencies for working class communities. We have ensured that the expansion of energy efficiency work creates living wage jobs and career pathways for local residents. We are also the ones that have borne the brunt of the fossil fuel economy. Many of the urban areas we work in have to deal with the hazards from midnight dumping of chemical waste on vacant lots, toxic industrial emissions into the air and water, and substandard housing contaminated with lead paint. The fact that a person living in a community of color is 39 times more likely to live in one of these environmentally burdened communities is not just a statistic, but a harsh reality that our members live and breathe every day. For GJC, Senate Bill 1798 is an important piece of legislation. It will require Entergy, the owner and operator of the Pilgrim nuclear power station in Plymouth, to pay $25 million a year into a fund to support decommissioning and post-closure work at the facility. These funds will be collected by the Commonwealth and placed in an escrow account. Should other available funds not be sufficient to fully decommission this nuclear power plant, this money would be used for that purpose. Should other funds be sufficient, this money would be returned to Entergy once state officials certify that the commissioning is complete. This bill, plain and simple, is legislation that will help protect taxpayers, ratepayers, and all consumers from having to pay for shutting down and cleaning up this nuclear power plant. Lacking enough money to do this work promptly, Entergy will choose to take as much as 60 years to finally decommission the site. This, too, is not in the public interest. The site needs to be cleaned up as quickly as possible so that it can be transformed, reused, and help our communities grow in healthy ways. Entergy has a responsibility to clean up Pilgrim, where they have generated power for our communities and profits for the shareholders for many years. We believe that as a responsible corporate citizen, Entergy should welcome this approach. We urge you to report favorably on Senate Bill 1798. Thank you.
Senator Downing. My name is Robin Hubbard, and as chair of the Orleans Democratic Town Committee out of Cape and Islands, representative of the Massachusetts Democratic Committee, I'm submitting testimony outlining our support of Senate Bill 1797, which would impose an annual fee of $10,000 for a spent nuclear fuel rod assembly that remains in the spent fuel pool at Pilgrim, and Senate Bill 1798, which would require Entergy to pay an annual $25 million post-closure funding fee to assure that there is adequate money available to complete a timely decommissioning of the Pilgrim site. On June 3rd of this year, the Orleans Democratic Town Committee passed the following resolution in support of Senate Bill 1797 and 1798. Whereas the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant in Plymouth, Massachusetts, poses unreasonable threats to the lives, health, environment, and economy of the residents of Massachusetts, therefore it is hereby resolved that Massachusetts Democrats urge the Massachusetts State Legislature to pass legislation currently pending before the legislature, including Senate Bill 1797, assessing plant owners' fees for failing to put used fuel rods into dry cask storage, and Senate Bill 1798, providing for a decommissioning reserve. As part of the resolution, the Orleans Democratic Town Committee endorsed sending this resolution to every Democratic Town Committee in the Commonwealth and bringing the resolution to the floor of the Democratic State Convention in Springfield on September 19th. At the State Convention, the resolution was brought to the floor and passed unanimously by a voice vote. It is clear that the citizens of the Commonwealth are concerned about the economic effects of the Pilgrim plant and strongly feel that the burden should not be borne by the taxpayers and ratepayers of Massachusetts. I thank you very much for this opportunity to present this testimony and hope you will consider it.
Thank you very much. And I consider anything to be a raw hearing.
He's closed now. We can't get those in.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the committee for the opportunity to submit this testimony. My name is Janet Dominitz. I'm the Executive Director of MassPIRG. MassPIRG has a long history of calling for consumer protection, corporate accountability, and government transparency. For most of our 45-year history, we have advocated against nuclear power for many reasons, including that it is an expensive source of power and there is insufficient insurance of any kind against the threat that it poses. The two bills that we are supporting today, 1797 and 1798, help address those concerns, which remain as strong as ever with the recent announcement of Pilgrim Station's imminent closure. Senate 1797 and 1798 have been filed to protect consumers and taxpayers in Massachusetts, to hold Entergy financially accountable for what will no doubt be the extraordinary costs of decommissioning Pilgrim. So a few very quick points on 1798, which many people have provided figures and facts for. Number one, it is extremely expensive to decommission a nuclear power station, and we believe Entergy should be prepared for that expenditure. The NRC has recently put the figure of $1.2 billion on that price tag. we want Entergy to be prepared. Number two, estimates of future costs vary greatly, and we can only assume that they will not vary downwards but upwards, and we want Entergy to be prepared for the likely eventuality that costs and estimates will rise. And then third, we need to make sure that Entergy has a plan and a pocketbook for decommissioning and decommissioning quickly and safely. So for those reasons, and similar for 1797, I mean, the case for that bill for creating a storage fee for spent fuels is similar. It's likely to be an expensive proposition. Entergy should foot the bill, and this proposal is fair and important for the Commonwealth and its citizens. So we hope both these bills will get swift action, and we thank you for your consideration.
I'm Diane Turco. I'm Executive Director for Cape Town Winters, and Senator Downing and Representative Golden in the committee. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present on behalf of Cape Town Winters and Massachusetts Town Winters, representing citizens from Metro Boston, the North Shore, South Shore, and Kitchen Islands. We also thank your staff for meeting with us over the last few months to begin the conversation about the importance of passing this legislation. We contend that this bill is necessary, and I'm speaking specifically to 1798. I was asked to address that vote. So we contend that this bill is necessary to protect the Commonwealth's economic interests and submit testimony to support this legislation to ensure Entergy fulfills its obligation to fully fund the decommissioning of Pilgrim. There is strong public support for these bills. Entergy Corporation is already in financial distress with the recent announcements to close Pilgrim in 2019 and Fitzpatrick in upstate New York in 2016 due to poor market conditions and lower energy costs. Pilgrim alone is losing $40 million per year for the company. This corporation has shown irresponsible economic decisions by failing to complete maintenance and upgrades in Pilgrim as cited by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The result will be the financial impact of up to $100 million in expected repairs and updates to meet NRC standards as reported by Senator Edward Markey. Entergy has proven its inability to meet federal guidelines during operation by not investing capital into a degraded reactor. So why then will we expect this corporation to fully fund decommissioning after Pilgrim closes? They don't have a very good record. Proactive legislation at this important time is required to meet our obligations to our children and future generations. The federal government has already reneged on its promise of a national repository for the spent fuels, today nowhere near any resolution. Their rules are arbitrary and full of smoke and mirrors to hide the real costs of decommissioning to benefit the industry at the detriment of public coffers. Entergy has a fiduciary responsibility to its shareholders. This committee has a fiscal responsibility to the people of Massachusetts. Use our precious tax dollars for the betterment of the people, not bailout for Entergy. State revenue is desperately needed to invest in our future, education, healthcare, housing, and green, clean energy. Transfer of costs and risks to future generations would not only be irresponsible but immoral. This legislation is necessary to force change and protect the state's interests, our children, and the future. We ask for your full support for Senate 1797 and 1798 and request the committee immediately release the bills as emergency measures because this needs to be done quickly with a favorable recommendation. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Next, we've been joined by Senator O'Connor. Senator Aye. Senator O'Connor Ives will be followed by David Zeke and Ed DeWitt. Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to speak in favor of a bill that I filed, Senate Bill 1781, an act to regulate hydraulic fracturing. This bill would prohibit the construction and operation of Class II injection wells in connection with hydraulic fracturing or using fracking chemicals in connection with the extraction of natural gas in the state of Massachusetts. In essence, this legislation would ban fracking in the Commonwealth. Our state is in the enviable position of being able to observe and learn about environmental destruction and water pollution caused by fracking in other states before it's introduced to Massachusetts. Hydraulic fracking intensely uses water to the rate of 1.2 to 3.5 million gallons of water per well, diverting water from other human demands. It subjects people to pollution through surface spills, air pollution, and the migration of gases to the surface by contaminating water. The quality of our drinking water is of paramount importance. Many residents in the state use well water, while others use municipal and state water supplies, all equally vulnerable to chemical pollution if fracking is introduced to Massachusetts. Notably, the state of Vermont banned fracking in their state in 2012. This year, Maryland placed a moratorium on fracking until 2017, and New York State banned fracking for natural gas in their state in the spring of 2015. They spent 7 years in a diligent review process with their Department of Environmental Conservation, concluding, after years of exhaustive research and examination of the science and facts, prohibiting high-volume hydraulic fracturing is the only reasonable alternative. Recently, a U.S. Geologic Survey report identified an area in the Pioneer Valley in Massachusetts as an area with black sandstone that has natural gas reserves. It is prudent to address the matter of fracking now before there are proposals in our own Pioneer Valley. By banning fracking before we have to respond to proposals in our state is crucial. Massachusetts will inevitably be vulnerable to fracking when larger reserves are depleted. Preventing the destruction of currently potable water is a great deal less costly than spending public resources on cleaning contaminated land and water to serve residents who can no longer use their well water. Of the 2,500 hydraulic fracturing products in the industry, 650 contain chemicals categorized as known or possible human carcinogens. Over 200 of these products have components listed as trade secret on their OSHA material safety data sheets. Slurry pools often sit in close proximity to the site and are an additional threat to our natural resources. If we poison our valuable and finite water supply, we are simply shifting to a new problem of no longer having affordable drinking water and water independence. We can do better, and this legislation takes the bold action necessary to settle this question in Massachusetts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Mr. Chairman? Thank you very much. Next, David Zeke and Ed DeWitt. David and Ed will be followed by a panel of Roseanne Shapiro, Margaret Rice Moyer, Irene Payne, and Laura Kelly. David and Ed. After you, John.
Chairman Downing and Vice Chair Broder, I appreciate having the opportunity today to speak to you in favor of Senator Wolf's Bill 1798. My name is David Zeke, and I'm here representing the Massachusetts chapter of the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club supports and recommends S 1798. The money that this bill provides for post-closure activities at $25 million, as we've seen from earlier testimony, is really a pretty small amount considering the amounts that we're dealing with when we're talking $1 billion or more for the ultimate closure of the plant. This fee supplements, of course, the money, the $25 million supplements the money that Energy will provide. But if we get to the point where the funds for the post-closure activities are insufficient, one of the things that's going to go by the wayside is redevelopment of the site. And that's really what I'm commenting on right now, is that the jobs, any new jobs or any new uses of the site will just languish because we will be trying to avoid any unintended or undesired expenditures from state taxes. We just won't have the money to do it. So thinking that we can start to repurpose the site, I think this fund, this trust fund that we have, will give us some flexibility and some control to start to look for ways to use parts of the site that perhaps are not endangered by the decontamination activities that are going on elsewhere on the site. So the fee and the trust fund are prudent measures to protect Massachusetts taxpayers from bearing the cost of establishing new uses, and having this site ensures that Massachusetts can progress on a transition to new uses, even while we're still cleaning up the site. There was an article in the October 27th Boston Globe entitled The Future of Energy that said, quote, "The news of Pilgrim's closure can be the shot heard around the region. It can serve as a kickstart to the modernization of our electric grid from one that delivers fossil fuel to one that delivers scalable amounts of clean and renewable energy." But we believe we can go a step further, and that the Pilgrim site itself can become a component of this new clean and renewable energy environment. The existing connection that is there then to the grid is a major asset that we can take advantage of. Suggesting that we entertain turning parts of that site into a solar farm, and that, while solar energy is not ever going to, at that site, is not ever going to deliver the amount of energy that the nuclear plant does. Nevertheless, it does provide jobs and a purpose for the site, and the maintaining and operation of the solar farm, in addition to the, the connection to the grid and so forth, is a good source of highly technical jobs. The solar farm, depending on how much of the site were used, it could reach to 200 megawatts versus the 685 megawatts that the nuclear plant currently can provide. Of course, it doesn't operate all day long as the nuclear plant can. Pilgrim's closure really represents both a driver and an opportunity to continue and to enhance our state's leadership in developing a clean energy economy. Sierra Club believes that closing the Pilgrim nuclear power station provides an excellent opportunity to establish new and renewable energy sources for the Commonwealth. And to help make that happen, we urge you to support 1798.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, I'm Ed DeWitt. I'm the Executive Director of the Association to Preserve Cape Cod. APCC is the preeminent environmental advocate on Cape Cod, where the environment is our economy. We not only have members in all 15 towns, 5,000 members across the Commonwealth from about 170 of the towns. So there's many people who live off Cape who have a definitive interest in the environment of Cape Cod. What I'd like to do is to take a little time this afternoon and talk about environmental success over the course of my lifetime. And the environmental successes that we have had over my lifetime are comprised of three elements. One is to make the person who puts the environment at risk pay for it, not the taxpayers in general. The second is to incentivize best management practices. And the third is to put a trust fund aside, a reserve fund, so to speak, so that if something happens, we have already availability of funds to respond to those types of issues, like a plant closure. Senate Bills 1797 and 1798 accomplish all three of these goals. First of all, it puts the responsibility, the risk of loss, on the operator of the plant, the person who's generating profits from that plant. They are the rightful person to bear the risk of loss in terms of this is going on. It also incentivizes best management practices. One of the problems that we have environmentally is that often corporate approach is to go to the least expensive means and not the best management practices. But time and time again, we're shown when you factor in life cycle costs, best management practices save us money, they protect the environment, and they add to the quality of life. And thirdly, these bills provide for a fund to make sure that the money is there to clean up, to protect the environment. So this is a perfect match. It is based on our environmental experience and our environmental accomplishments, of which the Commonwealth has been a leader, and I hope you'll continue to be a leader. Thank you very much.
Thank you both very much for your time. Next panel is Roseanne Shapiro, Margaret Royce Moyer, Irene Payne, and Laura Kelly.
name is Roseanne Shapiro. I live in Harwich and am here in support of Senate Bill 1798. I speak for seniors like myself who are considered low income and who are struggling to make ends meet, even with the availability of subsidized housing, low-cost, no-cost health insurance, and other programs we rely on to ensure our ability to meet and address our basic needs. And there are seniors who must choose between buying food and filling much-needed prescriptions. Fortunately, my circumstances are less dire, and at 71 years of age, I have no guarantee of continued good health. Most low-income seniors like me rely on Social Security as our main income source. We have been told that we can expect no COLA, cost of living, increase in 2016 because there was no appreciable increase in the cost of living nationwide. So we are faced with making do, even though we know that our living costs continue to rise. It is unthinkable to me and to those like me that we might face the possibility of shouldering the additional burden of paying increased taxes to cover the cost of decommissioning the Pilgrim nuclear power station because its owner, Entergy, has not put aside sufficient funds for the proverbial rainy day. We who are on one of the lowest rungs of the income ladder, often dealing with multiple health concerns and with few, if any, additional financial resources, cannot and should not be saddled with Entergy's burden in the form of increased taxes. I urge you to consider all segments of the population and take the steps necessary to report Senate Bill 1798 favorably out of committee so it may be considered and voted on by the entire legislature. Thank you for your time.
And my house costs just went up, the taxes went up $500.
Ma'am, please, other people are waiting. Thank you.
Chairman Downing and Vice Chair Broder and members of the committee. My name is Margaret Rice Moyer. This morning, let me call your attention to one life perhaps not so different from your own or that of the many deeply concerned people gathered here today to speak to S 1797 and 1798. My husband and I are retired teachers living on our pensions. In 2009, after purchasing a home in Brewster, we learned of the grave threat of economic catastrophe looming on the horizon posed by the Pilgrim nuclear power station. With no home insurance willing to cover the economic risks of the plant, we felt betrayed. How is such an oversight possible? And indeed, is it an oversight? Cape Cod is a place where the extraordinary beauty of the natural world makes even the most difficult life challenges survivable. It is a place, as the poet David White says, that is a good place to die. And who doesn't know that these incredible natural resources are the very heartbeat of our economy? You have been told of the incalculable economic risks that face our Commonwealth as the decommissioning of the power station is undertaken. You have been told that these costs will likely be around $1.5 billion. S 1798, which requires Entergy to pay a $25 million per year fee towards post-closure costs, would go far towards alleviating the significant tax burden that could, in all likelihood, fall on taxpayers' shoulders. Passing this bill will be one step towards ameliorating the unthinkable financial burden of decommissioning and towards protecting taxpayers from being forced into picking up this tab. All of our financial assets are tied to this land. Our homes homes and our histories live here on Cape Cod. We, like many seniors, cannot afford to carry the corporation's tax responsibilities. Our property is our life. For this reason, and all the many that have been articulated here today, I beg you to report this bill favorably out of committee and to support the passage of both bills to safeguard the economic livelihood of our wonderful Commonwealth. Do it not just for me and my story, but for yourselves and the hundreds of thousands of Massachusetts citizens whose economic survival is at stake. I thank you.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and members of the committee. My name is Irene Payne, and I'm a resident of Yarmouth on Cape Cod, and I live 25 miles across the bay from the nuclear reactor up in Plymouth. I'm a 14th generation Cape Codder and have added to the family tree by having children and grandchildren who are all residents of Cape Cod. And I'm going to speak about why Senate Bill 1798 is important to tourism. My family operates a campground in Wellfleet in the heart of the National Seashore, and for 50 years we've welcomed camping tourists. We're very aware that tourism is an important cog in the wheel that helps make Cape Cod a viable economic region, as I'm sure it does with other regions who are represented here today. And summer tourism brings in tens of millions of dollars to each Cape town every summer. And here's some news. According to recent figures from the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism, in 2014, Barnstable County took in a whopping $1,080,799,000 from visitors and tourists. And even better, $45,000 of that went to the state in the form of taxes. So I believe it is our responsibility to do everything within our human power to keep this strong economy ticking along. Due to the risk inherent in the decommissioning process, the owners of Pilgrim's nuclear reactor hold in their hands, like no other business does, the potential to negatively affect the economics of thousands of tourism-based businesses, along with the natural resources that are the major attraction of the Cape region. In fact, all Cape Cod industries such as aquaculture, cranberry bogs, real estate, recreation, the arts, retail services, everything we love about Cape Cod and everything most people like about the region can be severely economically affected if the best practices are not adhered to and things go wrong in the future due to half-baked measures. So, same thing everybody else has been saying, it's important to the economic stability of the Cape Cod region as well as to many other areas that Pilgrim be decommissioned with the highest and best practices available, and I'm sure they're there in the nuclear industry, and that is very expensive. As we've heard, there is not enough money in the decommissioning fund at the moment to do the job well. So therefore, I am going to dispense with everything else that is on my page and just say, thank you for listening.
Thank you for your testimony.
Hello. My name is Laura Kelly. I'm here to speak on behalf of the voice of the children who will bear the financial burden of decommissioning nuclear power plant Pilgrim in Plymouth. Hello. I'm Laura Kelly of Northeast Ham on Cape Cod. As a member of the 11th generation, born and raised on Cape Cod, I've spent most of my adult life doing all I can to protect our precious natural resources. I've created POCA, which stands for Protect Our Cape Cod Aquifer, an organization focused to educating and upgrading local environmental laws. Most of my friends work off of the land, whether they are growing gardens or growing oyster beds, and many truly rely on our natural resources and our surroundings in order to support ourselves and our families. Today I address you as the voice of our children and our children's children. By passing Bill number 1798, you protect the financial pockets of next generations of Cape Codders and beyond. We know Pilgrim will close. As a consequence, it is a given we will have to address the economic risk this closing creates for Massachusetts taxpayers and their children. Don't let them shoulder the unnecessary burden with huge tax bills. Entergy and the NRC assume their fund will grow from investing and be sufficient to complete decommissioning in the allotted 60 years. I wouldn't count on that. There is a real risk that decommissioning trust fund won't have enough money to complete the decommissioning as well as clean up Pilgrim sites due to contamination over time. Contamination will most likely spread, thus increasing cleanup costs. And if there's not enough money, what will happen? The Commonwealth and we as taxpayers will be obliged to foot the bill. As the voice of our children, I encourage you to pass Bill number 1798. If you do not pass this bill, our children will be burdened with higher tax bills which none of them deserve. What will the economic impact be on their lives? It's up to you to decide. Thank you for the consideration.
Thank you all for your testimony and presentation. Any questions? Thank you very much. Next, Jim Lambert. Just for folks' edification, Jim's the final one on page 1. Along with that, the elected officials went through 30 of the 63 people who have signed up to testify for those plans.
That's quite an introduction. My name is Jim Lambert. I'm a lawyer. Have been for about 50 years, I guess somewhat more than that. I retired from Wilmer-Hale about 2.5 years ago. What I'd like to do today is to explain briefly why this legislature has the right to enact S. 1797 and 1798. They are not preempted by the United States Atomic Energy Act. Even in the nuclear field, state laws grounded in economic purposes are not preempted. Both of these bills are clearly directed to economic consequences. 1798, as you've heard, is directed to the consequences of the Commonwealth. Could be as much as $1 billion. Pilgrim hasn't saved enough money to clean up after itself. 1797, you haven't heard much about yet. It's directed to even greater consequences. A few years ago, the Attorney General had an expert and estimated that the cost of the consequences of a spent fuel fire in Energy's spent fuel pool would exceed $488 billion. Way over the billions 1798 is talking about. The Supreme Court has made it clear that the federal government's exclusive field is limited to regulating radiological safety aspects in the construction and operation of a nuclear power plant. The Atomic Energy Commission Act itself says that states and local authorities can regulate activities so long as they're not doing so to protect against radiation hazards. More than 30 years ago, in what's still probably the leading Supreme Court case, Pacific Gas and Electric, the Supreme Court upheld a California law that went so far as to effectively prohibit construction of any new nuclear power plants. The Supreme Court said California could do so because it had legitimate concerns of what the economic consequences would be on California and its citizens, since the federal government hadn't figured out how to deal with nuclear waste. Besides, they haven't figured that out yet. This legislature has every power to enact 1798 because it's directed squarely and solely on Massachusetts' legitimate concern of what it might have to pay if energy has not come up with enough. Let me turn briefly to 1797. The Atomic Energy Act says that nuclear power plants are responsible for legal liabilities to people if there's what that act calls a nuclear incident. The Supreme Court has made clear that the federal government's right to regulate radiological safety does not preempt state laws that deal with the consequences, $488 billion, of a nuclear incident. Congress long ago decided that giving the NRC exclusive regulatory authority over radiological safety aspects of nuclear development didn't say states couldn't protect themselves and their citizens against the economic consequences if there should be an accident. There's one more situation in which a state law might be preempted, and that would be if it actually conflicted with federal law and made it impossible for someone like Entergy or any other nuclear power plant owner to comply with both. The test for preemption there is not whether 1797 might have any bearing on radiological safety. It would be preempted only if it directly and substantially affected decisions on radiological safety issues. The NRC tells all nuclear power operators, you can store nuclear power or spent nuclear fuel rods in either two ways. We believe that both are equally safe, or better than that, sufficiently safe. Dry casks or in the spent fuel pool. Nothing in 1797 tells Entergy which of those approved radiological standards it has to meet. It's their choice. It's not impossible for them to comply with the NRC. It gives them two choices. Bottom line is neither of these two bills are preempted. This has been necessarily brief, even though I noticed I went a little over 3. But if you or your counsel or anyone else would like to discuss this further, I'd be happy to help.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate the testimony report, State.
Can I ask you one quick question?
Surely.
You cited a case that is 30 years old, but sounds like it's a controlling case. There's been a lot of turnover on the Supreme Court in the last 30 years. A little bit of a different perspective, perhaps. Do you have any concerns about the current makeup of the court?
Not really on this. There were really 3 Supreme Court cases that fundamentally draw the line between economic and safety concerns. They were all decided almost 30 years ago. They've been law throughout that period, and I haven't seen any pressure or any indication that even this court would want to overturn any authority that's been around that long.
Thank you.
Very much. Next, another panel, Candace Perry and Betsy Smith, please. Thank you very much. Candace and Betsy will be followed by another panel, David Agnew, John Drinkwater, Maureen Burgess, and Janet Azarowitz.
Good afternoon. My name is Candace Perry. I'd like to thank you all for being here and listening so patiently to some of us repeating the same thing. I did bring a visual aid with me, and that is a map of Cape Cod. Here it is. So this is the Cape, and I represent the Down Cape. You like that? Down Cape Downwinders, and we're based in Wellfleet, home of the Wellfleet oyster, way up here, and many of us come from all over the Cape, and we thank you so much for your kind attention. I'm just going to say a couple of very brief things about 1797. Some of them have already been covered. It's basically an act establishing a fee on the storage of spent nuclear fuel in pools. When you start discussing this one, you'll have some trouble saying that many times quickly. It's to protect the economic interests of the Commonwealth and provides, one, that Massachusetts would suffer enormous consequences if there were a spent fuel pool accident at Pilgrim. I think we've all agreed to that. It would give our community some money to help them if such an accident occurred. And thirdly, and probably the most important one here, it gives the nuclear plant owner an incentive to make a choice about what to do. So by charging $10,000 fee for each assembly that stays in the spent fuel pool, which some call the wet storage, they make that choice if they would rather do that or find another way to store these spent fuel assemblies. Contrary to what some opponents of the bill might say, the bill does not require any nuclear plant operator to do anything that is not required by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, nor does it make it impossible for any nuclear plant operator to comply with both NRC regulations and this act. And
I think Mr. Lambert covered that pretty well, too. I'd like to turn my time over to my colleague Betsy, who will give you more of the details.
Hi, I'm Betsy Smith. I'm going to ask Candace to give you some handouts. I'm a recently retired faculty ESL professor from Cape Cod Community College. I can't go to a group meeting without having handouts. And one of the reasons that I wanted to take part in this presentation is that I have no scientific background, I have no economic background, I have no legal background, but definitions are really important to me, being able to understand the words. You have heard today fuel assembly, spent nuclear fuel, spent fuel pool, dry cask storage. These are for you to share with your colleagues who are not here. Picture is worth 1,000 words. If I don't have time for all of my words, you have words and you have pictures left. What is a fuel assembly? Instead of coal or oil, Pilgrim uses 580 nuclear fuel assemblies to boil water in the core of the reactor needed to create steam that spin turbines to generate electricity. Fuel assemblies are bundles of fuel rods that contain many uranium fuel pellets, and that's in this picture here, okay? Spent nuclear fuel. When the fuel becomes less efficient or spent, it is unloaded from the core to a spent fuel pool, and fresh fuel is added to the core of the reactor. So-called spent fuel is very hot thermally and exceedingly radioactive, so radioactive that it must be isolated for hundreds of thousands of years. Next, the spent fuel pool. The pool serves both to cool the fuel and to shield workers and the public from radioactivity. Pilgrim's pool is in the attic of the reactor, outside primary containment. It was originally designed, I'm not a mathematician, but listen to these numbers. It was originally designed for 889 assemblies, but later allowed to hold 3,859 assemblies. Pilgrim has about 3,200 assemblies in its spent fuel pool. Dry cask storage on the other side. Spent fuel assemblies 5 years out of reactor are cool enough to be taken out of the pool and placed in dry casks. Casks are steel canisters welded or bolted closed. The fuel assemblies inside are surrounded by inert gas, a non-reactive gas used to prevent undesirable chemical reactions. Each cylinder is surrounded by additional steel, concrete, or other material to provide radiation shielding to workers and members of the public. Each cask contains 65 to 68 assemblies. Pilgrim now has 3 casks arranged vertically on a concrete pad located on Pilgrim's property near the reactor building. NRC says it can remain there for 300 years. The casks will remain on-site, Entergy's responsibility, until there is an off-site repository, who knows when or where, and only then becomes DOE's responsibility. So I hope that if people ask you questions about what this all means, you can wave your sheet. There will not be a test.
Hopefully not.
Well, you got a cheat sheet if you need it. I have some signatures. Last night was a Brewstertown meeting, and all I had to do was say Dan Wolf, Entergy, and I had people lining up to sign in support of Dan's 2 bills. I should have brought more sheets because I would have had more signatures, but I would like to read them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next, we will take a panel. David Avenue, John Drinkwater, Maureen Burgess, and Janet Averroes. Maybe, although I am not sure, the last panel on nuclear.
Whenever the panel would start.
Good day, and thank you for listening. My name is David Agnew. I'm a resident of Harwich. I've had a deep, abiding interest in nuclear energy since before 3 Mile Island. My remarks regard S 1797, but I also support S 1798. Both the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the National Academy of Sciences have found that a fire in Pilgrim's spent fuel pool, the risk of a fire in Pilgrim's spent fuel pool is not zero, and the consequences would be disastrous. Dr. Gordon Thompson's testimony to the Massachusetts Attorney General stated that suppression of such a fire, quote, would be extremely difficult to achieve. In 5 hours, a 10-mile-an-hour wind could make areas 50 miles away uninhabitable, leading to total loss of property values and depressing all economic activity. I'll quickly summarize 4 independent studies of the economic damages of such an event. A current analysis by Dr. Brian Boyle, who spoke to you on 1798, found that over 75% of the $500 billion of Massachusetts GDP and over 75% of the $1 trillion of Massachusetts property values resides within 50 miles of Pilgrim Nuclear. Dr. Jan Baez's 2006 study done to the Massachusetts Attorney General found that the economic damage from a complete release of Pilgrim's spent fuel pool inventory of cesium-137 could reach $488 to $728 billion. That estimate does not include costs associated with cleanup or demolition of downtown business districts, heavily industrial areas, or high-rise apartment buildings. A 2013 study by France's publicly funded Institute of Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety found that an accident at a French reactor could displace 100,000 people, require the evacuation of 33,000 square miles, that's 3 times the size of Massachusetts, and cause upwards of $1.1 trillion in damages. A 2014 study done by doctoral candidate Osman Peshawar for the Cape Cod National Seashore Advisory Commission found that the losses within 50 miles of Pilgrim would be between $1 and $1.6 trillion. Experts agree we're talking about trillion-dollar losses, which would devastate our Commonwealth. If there's something we can do to mitigate such damage, we should, especially if it's as simple as expediting something that must happen anyway, the transfer of waste fuel from the wet pool to dry cask storage. S 1797 would provide an incentive to make that happen sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is John Drinkwater. I'm the Legislative Director of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. We'd like to register our court for Senate 1797. I think the reasons were just laid out pretty clear, all the reasons we have to incentivize Entergy to move spent fuel assemblies from wet storage into dry storage. Currently, there are roughly 3,000 of these spent fuel assemblies in the pool above the reactor at Pilgrim, and with a $10,000 annual fee would represent roughly $30 million fund annually. When this bill was filed early in the session, as filed, the fund is allocated primarily to the cities and towns surrounding the plant, with the focus primarily on Plymouth, and the remainder of those funds are dedicated to certain green communities to access. Within the last month, with the announcement that the plant would begin shutting down and hundreds of workers would be displaced from their jobs through no fault of their own, we see it as greatly important that a portion of these funds are specifically allocated to help these workers with training, retraining, or transitional assistance as they move on from the jobs, the steady employment that they've had at the plant for for many, many years. We've had some very good conversations with the bill sponsor, Senator Wolf, about amending the bill to create a specific fund that can be allocated towards helping these workers transition into new employment. And we look forward to working with his office on creating some language, and would very much like to work with this committee as well to add something that bill to help out these workers. Also do want to add that as the plant does transition, very important to us that as spent fuel assemblies are transferred from wet storage to dry storage, the highly trained, highly skilled, unionized workforce on the site is qualified to perform this work, and we feel that it's very important that their skills are utilized rather than bringing in outside contractors to perform this really important work on site. So with that, would ask for this committee support and a favorable report for Senate 1797.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair. My name is Maureen Burgess. I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen from the town of Truro on Cape Cod, and I also represent the town of Truro on the Cape Cod National Seashore Federal Advisory Commission. So I speak today on behalf of that commission. Our members represent the 6 outer Cape Cod towns, the county of Barnstable, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the Secretary of the Interior. We believe that Senate Bill 1797, an act establishing a fee on the storage of spent fuel in pools, will help protect the economic interests of the Commonwealth and provide nuclear power plant owners with a strong incentive to reduce the number of spent fuel assemblies in their plant's spent fuel pool. We've already heard about the report in 2006 for the Attorney General. I just want to direct your attention to another report that David mentioned. In 2014, our commission procured a study through the University of Massachusetts entitled An Analysis of a Disaster at the Pilgrim Nuclear Generating Station on the Economy of Cape Cod. And I have provided you with a copy of that report for your review. That analysis indicated that in a large-scale radiation event, such as a fire in the spent fuel pool, quote, Cape Cod is estimated to lose $2.2 to $12.1 billion in tourist expenditures and $45 to $71 billion in output over 10 years. In addition, Massachusetts could lose $5 to $8 billion in tax revenues. Furthermore, information cited in that analysis states that the total taxable property value on the Cape is nearly $73 billion, mostly in residential real estate, which is 8% of the total taxable property value in the Commonwealth. It is no stretch of the imagination to understand that a major radioactive event caused by an out-of-control fire in Pilgrim's spent fuel pool, which spews radioactive contamination to Cape Cod, would render real estate values worthless and put a halt to our major industry, which is tourism. As you are aware, the Cape Cod National Seashore is a major draw for tourists. Information from the United States Park Service notes that 4 million visitors come to the Cape each year. Meeting the needs of these tourists is reported to create over 1,700 jobs for our local people. Our advisory commission supports S 1797, which puts a $10,000 fee on each assembly remaining in a spent fuel pool each year. This fee should provide the Commonwealth funds needed to deal with the consequences of a spent fuel pool fire and provide nuclear power plant owners an incentive to reduce those potential consequences by moving assemblies out of the spent fuel pool. Thank you, and our commission has also submitted a letter in support of these bills. We hope you will give this one a favorable vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Janet Azarvis from Falmouth. To those of us who've been aware of the
the way energy does business, we know the closure of Pilgrim to be the beginning of an arduous process and likely a long, drawn-out battle. The evolution from the Atomic Energy Act of 1946 to the nuclear waste policy in 1982 established the government's responsibility to provide a place for the permanent disposal of radioactive waste and spent nuclear fuel. Of greater importance to taxpaying citizens, the state was given the authority, the sole authority, to regulate and decide how nuclear generation fits into the state's overall energy and land use plan, and may also regulate a nuclear power plant to address its own economic concerns. And by a U.S. Supreme Court rule, a state or local law whose rationale is grounded in economic purposes lies beyond and outside the field of safety regulation. Therefore, the Joint Committee of Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy, in carrying out its clearly stated mandate, bears a most important responsibility with Bills 1797 and 1798. Since the states are required to continue to house the nuclear plant and its waste until current problems are resolved, states must be allowed to play a full and effective role in the shutdown process. The Energy Corporation has told their stockholders and the public that they face enhanced Nuclear Regulatory Commission oversight and that Pilgrim is no longer an economically viable entity. Entergy has had annual revenues of more than $12 billion, $300 million through each year of operation of Pilgrim alone, certainly enough to bring Pilgrim to the basic NRC standards it now claims they can't afford to meet. We will likely hear from Entergy that it is unfair to impose the fees of 1797, claims which are obviously ludicrous, and it is well within the purview of the community to impose and protect the Commonwealth's pocketbook. Furthermore, Pilgrim's owner likely will recover the cost of all the fees from the DOE because of failure to open a federal repository as promised. Entergy has done this before and very likely will do it again. Bottom line, Entergy doesn't care about rules. They don't care about meeting obligations except to their investors. We, taxpayers, care, as I'm sure that each and every one of you care about your job, about representing and fulfilling promises made to each of your constituents whose votes you represent, voice you represent. And here, as members of the Energy Committee, you can do something about it in more ways than one. The bills proposed by Senator Wolf protect the citizens of the Commonwealth and mitigate the economic risks so the citizens of Massachusetts are not left with the unfair burden of the cost of a company doing business and then ignoring their responsibilities. As a member of Pilgrim Legislative Advisory Coalition, I ask that 1797 be reported out favorably and that you lend your full support to ensure its passage by the legislature. Do it now. Give Entergy the incentive they're offering to move the over 3,200 fuel rod assemblies to dry cast more quickly, clean up the site, and open it to the development of the alternative energy that the people of Massachusetts want, as does the governor. And without the legislation, the Commonwealth is left with a problem that we did not create and with imposed circumstances we cannot influence. Thank you for listening.
Thank you all very much for your testimony. Tom will be followed by Bruce Studd and Susan Carpenter, I believe, or Bruce Studd and Susan Carpenter. Folks, please keep their conversations to themselves. I understand it's too long. We're trying to get through it. Mr. Joyce, after you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and staff of the Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy. I appear here today for the record as Tom Joyce. I am legislative counsel to the Energy Corporation, headquartered in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'd like to, first of all, very simply record Entergy in opposition to the two bills that you just heard, 1997 and 1978. I don't need to go too much into the history of the bills. They've been around for a little while. I would note, however, that the last time I was here to testify on these bills, or similar bills, nearly many members of this audience still here today were there then, wore shirts and held up signs, "Close Pilgrim now." And part of their argument was to move all the spent fuel into dry cask storage because the spent fuel pool is unsafe. Well, Entergy has started the job of moving the fuel into dry cask storage before they decided to, or made the decision to close the plant. Then the argument became dry cask storage isn't safe. Close the plant because that's not safe either. Now it's an issue of how much money shall we charge or assess Entergy, who has no ratepayers. Pilgrim is a merchant nuclear reactor. For historical purposes, I can tell you, it bought the plant from Boston Edison in 1999. It's been in operation since 1972 and will remain in operation probably until May 31st of 2019, if not 2 years earlier, May 31st, 2017, if Entergy can satisfy its forward capacity commitments to ISO. As you know, when Entergy bought the plant from Boston Edison, they purchased all the rights, assets, and liabilities thereto. They purchased approximately $300 million, was transferred in the ratepayer funded decommissioning fund. Since that period, 16 or 15 years ago, that fund has grown from $300 million. And again, remember, Entergy does not have any ratepayers in Massachusetts. That's the thing I was glad to say. That fund has grown to nearly, as I understand it, $900 million in that period of time. I don't know what the final estimate is going to be on decommissioning the plant in Plymouth. I think clearly there has been a lot of talk about clean energy. There's been a lot of talk about employee displacement. There's been a lot of talk about a whole host of issues that I could cover here today, but you just don't have the time. But for example, as the displacement of workers, when Entergy closed Vermont Yankee, there are nearly 550 employees, all but 5 were found jobs with Entergy, or transferred, or retired. Just 5 out of 550 did not get jobs. Entergy is committed to trying to help the employees of this plant to find jobs within their fleet throughout the country. And they would do everything possible to run this plant continuously until they must close and do so safely. These bills have been acted clearly. I mean, we've heard testimony about preemption. Preemption, as lawyers know, derives from the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution. And I submit that the test isn't whether or not the state law can be carried out in conjunction with the federal law. It's simply whether or not the state law conflicts. I would argue, and Entergy on behalf of Entergy, and Entergy would argue, and I suspect would test, if these bills were to pass, the federal preemption argument of these 2 pieces of legislation. One which would assess approximately $32 to $33 million on Entergy stockholders, and the other one which would assess, that's annually, and another one that would assess $25 million annually on Entergy. Arguably, these bills, again, are, I think, they've been presented to you as being very well intended, and I don't disagree that they are not, that they are well intended, but I think they are certainly at this time punitive, and could be viewed as punitive in nature. Spent nuclear fuel is the responsibility of the Department of Energy. Decommissioning is the responsibility of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The Department of Energy is where all of everyone's anger should be directed. They have not dealt with the spent fuel problem as they have promised for 40 years. And if anyone here, as senators testified earlier to, want to sue the Department of Energy, we would certainly welcome. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would just ask that in your due diligence, that ultimately these two bills and adverse report. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Joyce. Any questions?
Sure. Hopefully real quickly.
Sure.
We've heard that the 60-year figure, the kind of start to finish decommissioning process, is that a creature of federal regulations, statute, or where does that 60-year figure come from?
That comes from the NRC, and that is the outside time of 60 years. There's nothing Entergy would like better than to decommission it faster than 60 years. What have we have seen? You've seen a plant that is in the decommissioning process out at Yankee Row, which incidentally was the first nuclear reactor in the country. We have seen Vermont Yankee close by that is going into the decommissioning process, or beginning the decommissioning process. I think Entergy would make, and Entergy, what they have done with Vermont Yankee is that they are suing DOE for any amounts of money that don't make up the difference between the ultimate cost of decommissioning and the decommissioning estimate, which has not yet been estimated for Pilgrim, and what they have in the fund. And they've been successful so far. They have successfully received something in the order of $70 million from the Department of Energy since Vermont Yankee closed. And I think they will continue to sue until they can get the money required to properly decommission the plant.
So the funds that are contemplated in these bills are separate and apart from the current trust fund monies and money set aside as part of the process to do the decommissioning process.
Yes.
And is there a reason to believe, I'm not focusing on ancillary harms, which are very, very real and very possible, but the actual cost of decommissioning, is that certain enough so that we can all have confidence that that fund is enough to do the job?
I'm not certain of that. I'm not certain that $900 million is enough, given what they've estimated in Vermont. But I am certain that Entergy will do their very best to sue the Department of Energy to get the funds necessary to properly decommission the plant. They've shown that in Vermont, and I expect they will show that in Massachusetts as well.
I guess what I'm wondering about ultimately is, it seems like an incredibly costly endeavor, and I'm wondering if the prudence of doing this balanced against the financial challenge to Entergy to move forward, presumably closing multiple plants over the next 40, 50 years.
I'm not sure I understand the
Is
question.
that I'm saying if
Sorry.
No, that's probably my fault. We're talking about almost $60 million a year, which is a lot of money, but isn't a huge amount of money in cleaning up the nuclear plant world. So I'm wondering if this is a prudent thing to do, given the scope of what the cleanup effort is going to be. Are these funds that Entergy is ultimately going to be spending anyway?
I don't think these are, no, I don't believe that they are Entergy-related funds that are going to come from their investors. I think if their investors were taxed or if they were required to pay a fee of some $60 million a year in Massachusetts, and some $50 million a year in Vermont, and some $100 million a year in New York, there would be no more company. There would be no more investors. I suggest that why stop at Entergy if that is the logic? Why not go back to the previous owner? I don't want to point my fingers at Eversource. They built the plant. Why not go back to GE? GE built the reactor. So I don't think it really is ultimately in the economical best interest of all of us to enact these bills. And I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bruce Scott and Susan Carpenter.
Susan had to leave.
Apologize, and understand it's been a long day. We're just trying to get to everyone. Bruce will be followed by Chris Kilfoy.
Thank you. My name is Bruce Scott.
I'm a co-founder of a group of Massachusetts citizens called No More Fukushima. And our primary mission is to close the Seabrook power plant. I have to say that there's a range of issues up there that are not appropriate for this hearing. And you might wonder, since these bills have absolutely nothing to do with Seabrook, why would I be here? It's because the 60,000 people who live in the Massachusetts component of the Seabrook evacuation zone are taxpayers. And we are concerned that we are going to have to, as taxpayers, pick up the bill for the cleanup of this plant, when it most certainly, notwithstanding Mr. Joyce's comments, rests with energy. He was throwing the responsibility in every direction that he could, except energy. And yes, they should pay for this. Just want to remind you of some of the things that were testified, came up in testimony today. And energy diverted some of its money that it had ready for Vermont Yankees cleanup. And now the state is having to sue them for it. That fund was not there as much as it ought to have been, and that was brought out in the earlier testimony. In Connecticut, in spite of what Mr. Joyce is saying, apparently, and this was mentioned also in prior testimony, the Connecticut taxpayers had to absorb the cost of cleanup, a good portion. I recollect $300 million. Please do not listen to Mr. Joyce, else you will probably leave the citizens of this state, your constituents, holding the bag. And let's face it, we haven't forgotten Dave Dig. They say it's $1 billion cleanup now. Who knows what it ultimately will be? Why should the taxpayer pay up the tab for this cleanup? There is no reason. And whether you're for nuclear power or against nuclear power, whether you're for keeping Pilgrim open or wanting to close it, there's absolutely no reason why, whether Republican or Democrat, every legislator who's concerned about taxpayers paying only their fair share should be 100% behind this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, Chris Guilfoyle. Chris will be followed by a panel that is Caitlin Sloan Joel, Andrew Shulman, Edward Wolf.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to testify before the committee. I've given you a written testimony that reiterates what many have said, but
Hold on one second, folks. Just keep the conversation down as we leave.
you got written testimony that reiterates what many have said. We certainly support 1797 and 1798. Our written testimony has a Western Mass perspective based on the dry cask storage at Yankee Road. The Bill 1758 is one of many that deals with consumer protection for consumers of energy in the state. We support that, as well as reiterate again that maybe it's not to this committee to do everything they can to enforce consumer protection laws for the purchase of energy in this state. But it's not just about propane or natural gas or electricity. It can also be about solar, and that's what my business is, 25 plus years offering solar systems in Western Mass. And that goes to the last point, which is Senator Eldridge's bill 1769, which is meant to prevent charges on electric or gas bills for the capitalization of the gas pipeline infrastructure. It's important to consider that the bill now before the House, and possibly if it passed, included a provision that is showing for calling for a minimum reliability contribution charge from all solar owners. And that's the proverbial camel with its nose under the tent, the straw horse, if you will, or straw man, to get charges on our electric bills to cover infrastructure costs like gas pipelines and other profit-making activities of the utilities, including large transmission lines. This committee, we appreciate your work. We look forward to your efforts to make consumers in Massachusetts understand and also just pay their fair share for these capitalization projects that profit the utilities. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next up, panel Caitlin and Joel will
Audrey. Audrey Shaw.
There we go, Audrey.
My handwriting, sorry.
Come on up. They're going to be followed by a panel that is Claire Humphreys, Nathan Phillips, and Richard Clapp. So you all are on deck. Appreciate everyone's patience. Know it's been a long day. Thank you very much. The one in the middle is the one that will go the other way.
Good afternoon, Chairman Diamond, Chairman Ryan, and members of the committee. My name is Caitlin Phillips. I'm a staff attorney with the Conservation Law Foundation, and I'm pleased to lead off this panel with our coalition partners to discuss solutions for the natural gas leak issue that is still a problem in Massachusetts. Bill H. 2871 and S. 1767 would implement a common sense requirement to maximize gas leak replacements when wells are open for other purposes. Bill H. 2870 and S. 1768 are the focus of my testimony. They would provide a powerful and fair economic incentive for our gas utilities to repair the remaining leaks faster. The key problem is that under the current system, it's the customers who pay for the gas loss through leaks. CLS analysis found that businesses and families of the Commonwealth have been charged upwards of $40 million per year for lost gas. Essentially, we pay for all the gas ordered by the utilities from their interstate shippers, even when it's not delivered to the customers. Instead, we should be placing this cost burden on the people who actually have the power to fix the leaks. Before the Commonwealth considers large expansions of gas pipeline infrastructure, we should be making sure that the utilities who will profit from that expansion are adequately incentivized to save all the gas that they can from the still leaky distribution system. Thank you for your time, and we'd like to thank Representative Ehrlich and Senator Eldridge for their leadership on this issue. I have copies of CLS white paper on the natural gas leaks issue in Massachusetts for background, and would just like to state that CLS also supports S. 1797 and S. 1798 filed by Senator Wolf.
Chairman Downing, Mr. Vice Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to testify today and for listening throughout many long energy hearings. I think what many of us are trying to do with this committee, is to promote energy policy that protects people, that protects communities, whether that be environmental, on their bills, or in other fashions. In 2014, Massachusetts made great progress with a public safety bill designed to prevent hazardous life-threatening incidents by standardizing leak classification, mandating greater transparency, and accelerating targeted replacement of gas distribution pipeline. We want to thank you for that. We truly believe that legislation will save lives. Together, we are returning the legislature now to look at the rate impacts and also at ways that we can maximize the efficiency of the intent of last year's law with respect to the Commonwealth's cities and towns. The policies we are discussing are distinct from ones debated last year and reflect our attention to years of research, policy updates in other states, and the specific focus of how leaking gas impacts ratepayers and municipalities. We do hope through passage of these bills we can help Massachusetts save fuel, save money, save time, and avert pollution and infrastructure degradation. I do want to comment on what has transpired as a result of last year's law. Massachusetts gave the utilities a carrot or a incentive for infrastructure replacement. Replacement is sped up, although it will still take decades. We should continue to explore ways to accelerate that rate of replacement and repair while balancing costs and concerns. Rhode Island Utility Commissioner Paul Roberti, chair of the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners Subcommittee on Pipeline Safety, told the Boston Bar Association panel that they said he believed that that state's 21-year time frame would be shortened to 10 if there was no time to release. We did not in 2014 remove a disincentive for repair. The ratepayer subsidy utilities when gas was lost. The way we look at it is that although we've given an incentive for replacement, they're sort of ratepayers are investing against themselves to continue to pass along the cost of lost gas. We think that when conversations around energy costs are so dominant that the Consumer Protection Bill, House 2870, is common sense. We have been working significantly with the information that is provided last and as well as organizations that represent them, such as the Mass Municipal Association. We're looking forward to continue that partnership. We do believe that both of these bills would support the abilities of individual communities in the state at large to address this problem. And just a quick comment on the information we've gained as a result of last year's law. Utilities are now required to report data to the Department of Public Utilities. In March 2015, they did. No state agency required that to be conveyed to municipalities. So you had the government right to map that yourself with some assistance from some of our other volunteers, and distributed that out to communities. We'd like to see, better communication. We're trying to proactively promote that. I'll turn it over to Audrey.
Hey, I'm Audrey Jolman. I'm from Keep. It's a Cambridge-based nonprofit that works to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and energy bills. In 2014, Keep worked to use a natural gas high-precision analyzer. We broke it down every street in Cambridge and Somerville in order to map all the gas leaks there. We shared the information with the cities and learned that they'd never known where the leaks were, nor what the costs were associated with those leaks. Because of this experience, we're really interested when, because of last year's law, the utilities released information about the leaks that are across the state, both in terms of the age of the leaks as well as their location. I spent the next 5 months of my life mapping those leaks in over 200 municipalities across Massachusetts, and I learned many things. One of them was that any leak that was considered potentially explosive was dealt with promptly. So that, so far as I can tell, is not an issue. However, leaks that are not considered dangerous, no matter how big they are not fixed promptly. As was already stated, there was one grade 3 leak in Boston on the corner of Park Drive and Beacon Street, right next to a church, that was first reported to National Grid in 1985. It celebrated its 30th birthday this September. This leak is not slated for repair until 2018. I have no idea how big this leak was when it was first reported in 1985, but it has gotten no smaller. In those 30 years since, that street has probably been open for different infrastructure repairs, including repaving, at least once, if not several times. Passing H 2871 would ensure that in the future, infrastructure repairs would be more integrated, that these leaks would get repaired when the street is already open. That makes it cheaper for the utilities because they do not have to then repave as perfectly or as permanently as they would otherwise. And it also helps protect the streets, which otherwise might have to be cut into right after they've been repaved. I also strongly support 2870 because it would make the utilities pay for the cost of the gas they lose. It would motivate the utilities to fix the biggest leaks fastest in the least expensive manner. In the most recent DPU report, the utilities themselves estimated that the cost of fixing every leak in the state at $102 million. That's, as Representative Ehrlich said, that would pay for, the lost gas would pay for those fixes within 1 to 5 years. And I'd just like to say that my kids love to go to dinner as often as possible and to the most expensive restaurants possible. And that's because they don't pay for the restaurant, right? If they had to pay for it, they'd be a lot less cavalier with those restaurants. As it is, all of us are taking the utilities out to a very expensive restaurant every year, where the food is being thrown in the trash. The least we can do is make them pay their bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Downing, Acting Chairman Broder. My name is Edward Wall. I'm here speaking about the benefits of the 2 gas leaks bills that are championed by Representative Ehrlich and Senator Elbridge, and also 50 other members of the House or so that co-petitioned on those bills. I'm the Conservation and Energy Chair of the Massachusetts Sierra Club and member of the Executive Committee, and we represent 50,000 members and supporters throughout the state. I'll be speaking to what I like to call the Gas Consumer Cost Protection Bill, as well as the Gas Repair Bill. The bill seeks to, as said before, incentivize utilities to fix the leaks now. The bill also seeks to relieve customers from paying for gas leaks from neglected, obsolete, and decrepit pipes for gas that was never delivered to a consumer. And speaking about neglected, obsolete, decrepit pipes reminds me of some of the arguments that we heard earlier on the nuclear plant being decrepit, old, and not maintained. So it's an issue of keeping up and having corporate responsibility also. As you can tell, the Sierra Club strongly supports these bills and their identical senator counterparts. I want to focus on some of the economic issues, and I'm using the LDC, the local district company's own figures, and those are outlined in the submission I gave earlier. Right now, we pay for that lost gas as part of the rate base, goes into the ratepayers' base. The measured percentage of the lost gas ranges from 2 to 3%, and if you believe the Harvard study, credit that even more than that. Let me give you a macro picture, and I think this is an understatement. The value of the wasted natural gas resource, at a residential rate of $1.50, and that's somewhere between the high in the last 6 years and the low right now, per therm, that's on your gas bill, ranges from $24.8 million to $66.7 million per year, depending on which estimate of loss you use. That's reflected in the TUE, the report from the TUE from DPU. That is the estimated cost of 20,000 remaining leaks is $101 million. If you go ahead and take the annual fee, deduct maybe 20% for the cost of gas to the utility, you have a margin there between the $1.50 a therm and what they pay for it to amortize the cost of those repairs over probably 5 years. And it's a question they can reduce those costs by going ahead and working closely with the cities and towns to coordinate those and amortize those. Let me give you a micro picture. Let's suppose every home pays a $1,000 gas bill every year. If you have a 2% leak, that saves $20 a year. A 3% leak is $30. If you take a look at the gas that's used for electricity, you have another 10. That's $40 a year for a small homeowner, a $1,000 leak, a $1,000 gas bill, or a $600 electrical bill. Let's take the city of Boston, for example. It has 272,481 housing units. That $40 translates to over $10 million of savings that goes into the local economy instead of going for paying gas exported into the state. So that's a very simple analysis. Let's look at the other issues here. You multiply the amount of gas used by each of those, and what you end up doing is you lower the cost of government and therefore taxes, because the government's a gas user. You lower the cost of business, because every business uses gas, and they either take that money home as profit, or they go ahead and take that, reduce their costs. You lower the cost of energy of your community, and you end up paying for not saving a wasted resource. Let me leave you with a couple of thoughts. Brief ones, please. Thank you, very quickly. It comes down to this. It's our air, it's their pollution, and we pay for it out of our own pockets. We got to stop that today. A couple of other issues. This is a bipartisan effort also. We have 14 towns right now, representing about 20% of the voting population of the state, including 2 Republicans, 2 towns who voted for Governor Baker last year, Bedford, Swampscott. We had a hat trick last night. We got 3 towns passing resolutions last night. So that's everyone's opinion.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate it. Any questions? Thank you all very much. Next panel is Claire Humphreys, Nathan Phillips, and Richard Clapp. And then we're going to switch things up and grab a panel with former Senator Glotis. And folks, to go back to the towing issue, who probably now know more about nuclear energy and gas leaks than they ever thought they would. Thank you all for your patience. I understand everyone's been here a long while. We're making good progress. The more we keep the minutes, the better. Folks.
Good afternoon. I'm Claire Humphreys. I'm the mother of 2. I have a daughter, Lucy, and a son, Brooke. And theirs are the faces that I have in mind when I do this work. I'm also a member of Mothers Out Front. We are a group of mothers and grandmothers working with many allies, and to whom are here today to build political will to stop climate change that threatens our children. We have 65 moms who came here today. And we're concerned with gas leaks. Each of you was given a packet of maps that show gas leaks in communities in your districts. And we want to thank you for that information because it's only available because of the previous legislation that you passed last year. Now we know what the picture is, which is why we have to come back. For the last 10 years, I owned a preschool center in Jamaica Plain in Boston. And through that, I've seen hundreds of parents close up. I see how much love, energy, time, and money the parents pour into their children. For myself, when my son was very little, he loved trains. And my family went to Legoland. And right inside the entrance of Legoland, there is a toddler train. It's still the only part of Legoland I've ever seen. It's a tiny little thing, and I rode this train, and the cars are tiny. My knees were under my chin. I sat behind my son, and I rode that train 37 times to make a 3-year-old happy. So I understand what parents will do for their kids' happiness and safety, and how much they're invested in their kids' future. But I also see that we're not addressing one of the biggest threats to their safety and their future that's out there. I know many on the committee are parents, and you have faces in mind when you do this work. And even if you're not, you care about kids in the future, or you wouldn't do this job. You have faces in mind, just like everyone else here. I know there's a lot of pressing issues and threats that demand the time and attention of the legislature and challenge the budget. But I have trouble thinking of one of them that isn't worse if we don't get in front of this threat, either because of direct impacts or from resources that will have to be redirected from elsewhere. So think about that, and think about those faces. All these people who came here today, it was the middle of the workday, and they came even though school kids will need picked up and after-school activities have started. So a lot of carpool favors were pulled to get here today. But it also represents a lot of concern about the threats of gas leaks, pipelines, and moving us to clean energy sources. There are gas leaks in my city, they're twice my daughter's age. And at the same time, there's proposals to build more pipelines at taxpayer expense that will lock us into fossil fuels for the next half century or more that we can't afford. So we all came here today, even though a lot of us had to leave. And we want to say, fix the leaks first, and fix the leaks fast. It's good for the Commonwealth, for the people, and for our future. And for the sake of all those faces, and particularly Amelia, who's about to be 3 weeks old.
Don't forget a tremendous
And Nadi, who was 6 months and had to leave from the nap. I say respectfully.
Sometimes people stay for that.
Respectfully, be the leaders we need you to be. Thank you.
Senator Downing and Representative Broder, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Nathan Phillips. I am on the faculty at Boston University. I teach in the Department of Earth and Environment, and my training is in tree physiology and forest ecology. And as part of that work, I have to study greenhouse gases like methane and carbon dioxide. In 2003, I was part of a team that mapped over 3,000 gas leaks in the city of Boston. And subsequent to that study in 2015, in collaboration with a team at Harvard, and henceforth I would ask my colleagues to refer to that as the Harvard PU study, if they do, we estimated that the leak rate was about 2.7% of the delivered gas. That might not sound like a great amount of gas, but because methane is such a powerful greenhouse gas, we estimated that that would amount to about 10% of the state's greenhouse gas inventory. So it's not a trivial amount. Now, just today, as a point of clarification, I've heard the term 27 times as powerful as CO2. Someone used the figure 34 times as powerful as CO2. And someone else said 86 times powerful as CO2. I just want to clarify a little bit there that it's because of a time discounting factor. So all of those are correct in terms of a contingent on time. A methane molecule on average spends about 12 years in the atmosphere before something happens to it. And so if you talk about, some molecules of methane will last longer, some will be shorter, but it's about 12 years. So if you consider over a 100-year time frame, it's about 34 times as powerful. If you consider it on a 20-year time frame, it's 86 times as powerful. I think for your purposes, you can just think it's dozens and dozens of times more powerful than CO2. I wanted to mention beyond the greenhouse gas issue that the impact on trees. When we did our study driving the streets of Boston, we saw many, many trees that were dead or dying because of the gas leaks. We measured the soil, and there was gas in the soil of these dead and dying trees. And that's settled science in terms of why. The gas doesn't have oxygen in it. When it gets into the soils, it's anoxic. And just like if you overwater your plants and you cut off the oxygen, the roots have to have oxygen. So that's what is causing these trees to be dead and dying. And so in terms of moving towards solutions, what we've most recently found, there's some good news and there's some not so good news. The good news is that we found that about 10% of the leaks account for about 50% of the lost gas. So by targeting those big, what we call super emitters, we can make a lot of headway in a very strategic fashion. Another piece of good news is that cities like Boston have done a relatively good job of coordinating infrastructure. So the bill that relates to road paving and coordination across the utilities, the towns and cities that have done that show better results than the ones who are not coordinated. So there's a lot of promise there. And the last thing is that all of these leaks are potentially important. Even though we found that a few account for most of the gas, even small leaks can be damaging to trees and can be damaging in terms of an explosive hazard to people and property. So we have to take all of those seriously, and the two House bills and their Senate counterparts move us a long way in that regard. So I urge your support. Thank you.
Mr. Clapp.
Thank you, Chairman Downey and Vice Chair Brewer. My name is Richard Clapp. I'm a Boston resident. I'm Professor Emeritus of Public Health at Boston University School of Public Health. Proud to associate myself with Professor Phillips. I'm also former co-chair of the Steering Committee of the Greater Boston Physicians for Social Responsibility and a volunteer with Boston Climate Action Network. And I'm here to testify in support of the two bills that Representative Ehrlich and Senator Eldridge have talked about earlier today, and also the two bills that Senator Wolf has proposed for the safe decommissioning and dismantling of the Pilgrim nuclear power plant. I just want to comment briefly on the health effects of gas leaks. The public health effects are of two kinds. The first is the sort of more short-term health effect, which is if methane gas is a precursor to ozone. And so ozone formation in warm months increases asthma, has been said by earlier speakers today. So by controlling the gas leaks, we control some of the production of ozone, which contributes to our asthma problem. The Physicians for Responsibility earlier this year issued a statement on May 5th. Asthma has reached epidemic proportions in the U.S. An estimated 1 child out of 12 suffers from wheezes from asthma. And to get control of asthma, we must reduce its underlying causes. One cause is ozone. And then they go on. Ozone exposure can decrease lung function, trigger exacerbations of asthma, and increase rates of hospitalization for asthma. So controlling gas leaks is important for that reason. And also according to the Massachusetts Strategic Plan for Asthma for the years 2015 to 2020, that was released earlier this year by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, the prevalence of asthma is among the highest reported for states across the nation. So the Massachusetts asthma rates are amongst the highest of any state. And furthermore, the prevalence of asthma in blacks and Latinos is uniformly higher than the prevalence of whites and Asians in cities such as Boston. This was referred to earlier by the Green Justice Coalition speaker. The last thing I would say about methane is that its long-term impact, as Dr. Phillips has said, is it's a powerful greenhouse gas. So that has profound public health implications for future generations. Councilor O'Malley said something about how methane increased pollen or increased allergies. I don't think that's true. I don't think Councilor O'Malley took my course at BU. It would be in this long-term sense of increasing greenhouse gases, and therefore increasing the greenhouse effect, increasing pollen, and that does increase so it's sort of a long chain of cause and effect, but pollen does increase allergens. And then, so those are the reasons why I support the gas leaks bills. And then finally, I would say I fully support Senator Wolf's bills having to do with carefully removing nuclear waste and decommissioning the Pilgrim nuclear power plant. I followed this for years since I was director of the Massachusetts Cancer Registry in the 1980s, and I commend Senator Wolf and the senator from Philadelphia, I guess, apparently owns a gas station, that this is an important bill, and I'm glad that it's bipartisan and part of the committee. That's all I have.
Thank you all for the testimony and patience. Next, Guy Lotus and the panel on the zoning issue. Thank you all for your patience. You'll be followed by Daniel Gotti and Kate Gallo. We'll come back. So Daniel and Kate Gallo, you're on back.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you all for your patience.
Thank you. In the interest of time, it will be extraordinarily brief, and we appreciate your patience as well. Mr. Chairman,
folks, just please keep the conversations down. Listen while you wait.
Through you to members of the committee, my name is Guy Lotus, and I'm the legislative agent for the State Towing Association and the Track Pact, and I'm here today to support House Bill 2897, an act relative to recovery. Mr. Chairman, while I am here and also representing the State Towing Association, and in the interest of time, I'm also here to support House Bill 2908 and House Bill 2918, which I can tell you has received unanimous support from not only the Executive Board of the State Towing Association, but the entire membership of the State Towing Association. Mr. Chairman, the former Representative John Mahoney, a former member of the Joint Committee on Health, Communications, Utilities, and Energy, House Bill 2897 makes a common sense update to an antiquated provision in the Code of Mass Regulations as it pertains to recovery of motor vehicles. Basically, even though tow companies are required to use the exact same specialized and expensive equipment, such as cranes and wreckers, for both commercial and passenger vehicle recoveries, tow companies are required to charge different rates for commercial and passenger recoveries. So in other words, the first thing and most important thing is there's a difference between a recovery and a tow. If a vehicle goes over an embankment, they're upside down. We'll get to those in a minute. Pat will show you. But if a vehicle goes over an embankment upside down, that's not a tow, that's a recovery. And it costs significant money for certain companies to come out and have a crane or have a wrenching vehicle to be able to recover that vehicle before it tows it. If it's a commercial vehicle, they get compensated. If it's a passenger vehicle, they're only allowed the $90 rate to be able to move that vehicle. So it's an antiquated, it needs an update, and we're here today to ask you to support House Bill 2897, which, by the way, did pass your committee last session, and we certainly hope it could pass again. To the right of me, Mr. Chairman, I have three very distinguished guests, panelists. Kim Lowe has over 30 years in the tow industry. She's the executive director of the State Towing Association. Attorney Pat Matthews has represented the industry, knows the towing industry for over 25 years. We actually have an owner of one of the recovery teams by the name of Big Wheels Recovery. And both, just very briefly, want to talk about the importance of this bill and why it needs to pass your committee. Thank you.
Senator Dunn, Representative Rivera, and members of the committee. Thank you for hearing us. H.R. 2897 will address three very important issues. First of all, under the Unified Response Manual that we are a signatory on of the Massachusetts Highway System, as far as the Massachusetts State Police Tow Agreement, as well as many of the local police departments, require tow companies to have specialized equipment, specialized training, and excess capacity for immediate response. The requirements are in line with quick clearance policies for roadways and follow the guidelines of the traffic incident management systems of the federal government. This means tow companies are training their personnel and carrying excess capacity specifically for roadway quick clearance and emergency response. Unfortunately, under 220 CMR 272, though the CMR recognizes that specialized equipment is required for commercial vehicles, they fail to recognize that the same equipment has to be utilized to recover passenger vehicles. And the distinction is very, very blurred, because a vehicle that is a passenger car displaying a commercial motor vehicle plate falls under a commercial motor vehicle. But if it has a passenger vehicle plate on it, it falls under the regulations as a passenger vehicle. Same job, paid differently. Secondly, HR 2897 will bring Massachusetts in line with the federal regulations. The federal deregulation of the trucking industry allows states to regulate transportation of involuntary towing, not recovery. We're one of the few states that regulate recovery for passenger vehicles. And finally, the equipment required to provide the service, whether it be passenger or commercial, in many, many, many cases are identical. We can't continue to bear the cost associated with recovering passenger vehicles that are lost and provide the Commonwealth with the economic benefit of quicker clearance and the reduction in the impact of lane closures. So that's why we're asking for that. In addition, while I'm here, I just want to speak very briefly on House 2908, which Representative Sybeck spoke on. It's to protect consumers, to ensure that all towing companies are on a level playing field, and the state has some recourse in ensuring consumer safety. 2918, all that does is we are a public utility, just like Boston Edison or Enstar or whatever. We are the only industry regulated by the Department of Public Utilities that does not have a set timeline that requires the DPU to handle our petition in a timely manner. It's an open window. We're over 3 years on our petition right now. Normally it takes most other utilities 6 to 8 months. All we're asking is we propose the same timeline be used for the towing industry that is used for every other regulated utility through the department. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Attorney Patrick Matthews, and I'm an attorney who practices here in Massachusetts, and I represent a lot of the towing and recovery companies, not only in Massachusetts, but throughout the country. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Co-Chairman, for our opportunity to speak to you today and through you to your committee. We're asking right now to have a change done to Mass General Law 159B, Section CD. That's the enabling statute in Massachusetts that allows the Department of Public Utilities to regulate police-ordered non-consensual towing of vehicles. Towing and recovery companies throughout the Commonwealth are confronting a problem every single day based on the fact that there's a distinction that's being drawn between recovery of a passenger vehicle versus recovery of a commercial vehicle. And as the previous speaker just mentioned, the distinction between those two different services is based on the license plate that the owner of the vehicle chose to get when they got the vehicle. Also, the rule that determines on whether or not we can charge has been eaten away or eroded by a bunch of exceptions. And what we're asking to do is basically just treat passenger vehicles in this statute the same way that we treat commercial vehicles, which, as we said, is in keeping with the federal mandate, which basically does not regulate towing. It says basically states can regulate police-ordered, non-consensual towing, but not any service, route, or route, which is the service provided. Just to give you, to illustrate it with my point, I've got a few photographs here. In this photograph here, you see this is a vehicle. It looks like Tundra. It's off the road. That right there is called a rotating record crane, which is a very expensive piece of equipment. If this has a commercial plate, he can use his equipment to take it out there and charge whatever it requires. This piece of equipment right there is about $750,000 piece of equipment. If it has a passenger plate, it's $90. They are obviously
$90 on the hour, or just $90
Well,
for
$90.
Yeah,
It's $90 for the first hour, and
$70.
and it's $35 per half an hour for your extra man, and that all comes in with the tow.
not for nothing. How long would that take?
Well, by the time you set up and rig it, I would hopefully be out of there within, I try to do it really fast, 30 minutes. And I try to get in and get out. That's why this is called, if you come with a regular ramp truck or a tow truck, could take 2 to 3 hours.
Right. And what's happened is Massachusetts has quick, clear clearance policies, where they, and also the federal government, where they want these road accidents cleared quickly because they prevent further accidents and interruption of commerce. So guys like Big Wheel have gone out and spent lots of money so that they can do this. They need to be able to be paid for their equipment. Some other exceptions to the rule is this. One is the commercial versus passenger. The other thing is, if a person calls the tow company themselves, say they instead of waiting for the state police to come, they call down their own phone, all right, at that point, we can charge what we need to in order to justify the service. Another exception to it is if the owner consents to the recovery. So if we get to the scene and the person's there, they're standing there, and they can sign an authorization saying, listen, we're going to use this extraordinary equipment. Once again, we can charge a normal rate. But very often people have been taken away in abandonments, and that's not possible. One of the other exceptions is, did the owner ask for the vehicle to be brought to a different location? So under our regulations as we have now, if that person says, oh, I want to take this vehicle and I need it to bring brought to my garage or bring it to my home, at that point we can charge the regular rate. And then the final thing is, the rule provides that if a tow company shows up to a scene and they see the thing standing with the vehicle there, if they do it themselves, and they're not going to, it's a passenger vehicle, they're not going to get paid for it. However, if they call in another company, an outside company, and they come to it, the outside company is entitled to pay the full amount. So we have a situation here where if there's an accident, and if it's a passenger vehicle, we might be all waiting on the side of the road for half an hour for another company to show up in order to, just so that this service can get paid for. It's a nonsensical regulation the way it's set. We originally, through Guy, went to the DPU and we asked to see if we could change the regulation. They indicated that they thought the best way to do it was through the legislation here that we proposed. Like you said, we were here last year, and this committee passed on it favorably, and we would ask you to do the same thing. With respect to the 2 other bills, I'd like to just say, with the voluntary towing bill and the timely rate bill, the voluntary towing bill, these tows I'm talking about here are involuntary, and when my client goes out today, they're called by either the state police or they're called by local police. In order to be on those lists, they've had Corey checks, they have drug testing tests, they have to have certain equipment, they have to have certain minimal insurances. They're very heavily regulated by those industries, and they have a cost associated with that and all the training. What happens is, because if it's a voluntary situation, they're not being called by the police, they're not being called by, they basically show up sometimes without any invitation on the side of the road, they call them gypsies, and they hook up. You don't know if the person that's in that car is a criminal of some sort. You don't know if they've been consuming alcohol. You don't know if they have the proper insurances. This bill would alleviate that problem and put everybody on the same playing field. So we're asking that you also favorably pass that particular law as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your patience. Any questions, Paul? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dan Gotti and Kate Gallo. Dan and Kate will be followed by Tom Cotta. And thank you everyone for your patience. If for some reason you are still here and you haven't signed up to testify, which I'm shocked of, please make sure to do so at the end. Dan and Kate, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. My name is Kate Gallo, and I'm a policy fellow of the Climate Action Business Association, which helps small businesses throughout Massachusetts take targeted action on climate change. I'm here today to testify in support of House Bill 2870 and hope to give a voice to small businesses in Massachusetts. While utilities are effective at monitoring and repairing grade 1 or 2 leaks, grade 3 leaks go unrepaired, wasteful gas, and draining our society in the process. And may I add, of the 25,000 leaks that have been identified, officials estimate only 2,000 are grade 1 or 2. This loss of gas is creating a financial burden on Massachusetts ratepayers, and the small businesses in Massachusetts that are largely ignored when it comes to the associated costs. As Representative Ehrlich noted, a Harvard University study found that if the gas leaks in the Boston area alone were captured, it would be enough to heat as many as 200,000 homes, valued at $900 million a year. The cost of the lost and unaccounted for gas decreases the total revenue of businesses in Massachusetts, in turn hurting the overall economy of the state. At a time when utilities are seeking ratepayer dollars for new gas pipelines, we are ignoring the most obvious solutions. The Commonwealth in recent years has set a priority of increasing energy efficiency. To do this, we need cost-effective, innovative solutions. We should focus on repairing the gas infrastructure we already have. It can go a long way towards meeting our energy needs while saving ratepayer money and reducing emissions. Put simply, enacting House Bill 2870 into law would ensure that gas leaks are repaired efficiently and spark innovative solutions to prevent future leaks so as not to push the financial burden on ratepayers. Speaking on the part of small businesses in Massachusetts, I urge the committee to vote favorably on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator Downing and Representative Broder. And while I have a second, Senator Downing, especially, I just wanted to say that regardless of what the House is doing right now, I hope that the Senate stays strong and insists on a solar bill that truly advances the interests of the solar industry, such as the bill that you passed through the Senate. So my name is Daniel Gotti. I'm the Executive Director of Massachusetts League of Environmental Voters. MLEV is a statewide nonpartisan organization dedicated to making environmental protection a top priority for Massachusetts elected officials, candidates, and voters in order to better protect our environment and our health. And for the record, I believe that MLEV has endorsed both the committee members here in the last election. I'm here today to testify in support of H 2870, H 2871, and S 1769, which I think are three very interrelated bills in that all three raise a common question. What kind of energy infrastructure do we want for the state of Massachusetts? Well, we're moving forward, hopefully, with clean energy sources like solar and wind. We obviously recognize that this state remains dangerously dependent on gas as a major energy source. Our dependence on gas threatens our community in a variety of ways. Gas, no less than oil, is a imported fuel to Massachusetts with enormous fluctuations in cost. The money we spend on gas ultimately leaves our state economy. And while we switch from coal to gas, well, the switch from coal to gas is a net benefit to our environment. Moving to gas is not sufficient to be able to meet our climate mandates. Until the state puts a price on emissions that will account for the impact of fossil fuels like gas on our environment, cheap imported gas threatens to crowd out domestic and renewable sources of energy for Massachusetts. Obviously, the biggest problem with gas, or one of the biggest problems, involves the leaks. Gas leaks are dangerous. Gas leaks are bad for our climate. Gas leaks are expensive to consumers. And gas leaks are commonplace. It's outrageous that there are 3,300 gas leaks out there that we know about that we haven't been able to address yet. As 2870 and 2871 would focus on fixing the infrastructure that we have, protecting consumers and protecting our environment from the impact of gas leaks while providing utilities with a strong incentive to fix the problem. The alternative to doing things well, as is often the case, is doing a lot more of it. Instead of getting our existing utilities, existing infrastructure right, obviously there's a push by utilities to charge ratepayers for new gas infrastructure instead. Ostensibly, this is to protect consumers from price spikes like last winter, but we know that a lot of this gas is being imported into the region in order to be exported. New gas infrastructure is unnecessary, and I think that all the studies that have been shown about leaking gas infrastructure recognizes that instead of building big new infrastructure, we could be fixing the infrastructure that we have. Ratepayers, I believe, and I think environmental voters will all agree, should not be saddled with the cost of counterproductive pipelines that would deepen our dependence on gas. Thank you very much, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you both for your testimony and for your patience. Next, Tom Guy. Tom will be followed by Michael Bergeron. Michael? All right. I'll come back to that one. We're going to call from the
Good afternoon.
afternoon, Chairman Downing, Vice Chairman Brodeur. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you today. My name is Tom Kiley. I'm president of the Northeast Gas Association, a trade association representing natural gas interests in the Commonwealth. The natural gas distribution companies in the Commonwealth deliver natural gas to approximately 1.5 million customers every day, from homes and businesses to schools, hospitals, and power plants. Regarding the proposed House Bill 2870 and proposed Senate Bill 1768, I want to express the opposition of our association and its members. The bill concerns the definition of the measurement of lost and unaccounted for gas. We believe that this issue was best addressed by this body in the legislature last year with the enactment of House 4614, an act relative to natural gas leaks. The leadership shown by the legislature in enacting the bill is well known and has already set the Commonwealth in a strong position regarding the reduction of leaks associated with the state's natural gas distribution system. The 2014 legislation clarified the schedule for the state's natural gas utilities to repair leaks and greatly advanced the timeline for fixing and or evaluating leaks. The legislation included a provision on accelerating the rate of replacing older pipe considered more leak-prone, cast iron and bare steel. Massachusetts does have one of the oldest gas systems in the U.S., so accelerating replacement of older pipe is a sound policy for public safety, economic, and environmental reasons. The gas utilities submitted the first set of plans to the Mass Department of Public Utilities last year and updated those plans earlier this year. These plans continue to accelerate the replacement programs provided for in the 2014 legislation. For example, National Grid's Boston Gas Company will replace over 100 miles of leak-prone pipe this year, increasing to over 170 miles per year by 2023. The other gas utilities, likewise, are also ramping up the pace of replacement. This is real progress. Regarding lost and unaccounted for gas, the subject of this proposed legislation, the DPU released a comprehensive analysis in June of 2015, prepared by consulting firm ICF, which addressed lost and unaccounted for gas in the mass gas system. The study provides a number of recommendations to the DPU to implement with the utilities. The industry is addressing this issue. The best approach is the approach already mandated by the 2014 Massachusetts legislation. That is, replace older, more leak-prone pipe on a timeline established in conjunction with the regulatory oversight of the DPU. Adding this new proposed layer of legislative accounting is, in our view, unnecessary. These conclude my remarks. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
One question. The number that was referenced, I believe, by Dr. Phillips was that 10% of leaks account for 50% of the loss. Is that, roughly speaking, what the, that's based on the numbers that we've seen in the Harvard BU study that we've seen I believe, in the ICF study as well. If we're talking about that 10% that are driving that 50%, do we think we're going to be able to get that with existing policy?
I absolutely do think we can get that. And there's a lot of things to factor into this, Mr. Chairman. One of the things is people think that there's a leak, go and fix it. There's a leak that just occurred, go and fix that. If a street has just been paved with other work done, the municipality is not very happy to have the gas company come in and go into that street, number one. Number two, the gas company may have worked with the local municipality to replace an entire section of pipe along that street. So there may be a reason to replace that. Certainly, the more significant leaks, though, have to be, under law, have to be repaired. If it's a grade 1 leak, obviously, you know what that is, so I'll skip that in the interest of time, Mr. Chairman. But grade 2 still has to be repaired in a very finite amount of time. So if it's significant leaks, they are getting repaired in that 12 to 14, 15-month period, sir.
The numbers that were, numbers that were referenced in previous testimony of the percentage of overall leaks that are 1, 2, and 3. I think would lead one to believe that grade 1 and 2 only accounts for somewhere on the order of 10% of all identified leaks. Is that right? So that nearly 90% of existing leaks are grade 3?
I haven't looked at the numbers more recently, Mr. Chairman. I'd have to check so that I don't give you any misinformation. But that's probably a ballpark correct number, sir.
That'd be great if you could double check.
I certainly will.
Thank you very much.
We'll get back to your staff immediately on that.
Thank you very much. Michael from the Boston Climate Action Network, whose name I must have butchered before. Michael must have what? Norcia from the Boston Student Advisory Council. Norcia and Kayla. Norcia and Kayla once, Norcia and Kayla twice. Norcia and Kayla not here. Michelle Sprague-Nether.
She's not here.
Diane Loud. Diane Loud, I don't know how to spell the last part of your last name. Diane, her mother's out front, Diane. Bill Malloy and Jim Blake.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, Bill had to leave. He had a commitment.
Recurring theme this afternoon.
Pardon?
It's a recurring theme this afternoon.
Sorry, representing the Navy today. So, I'm here in the due diligence of time for both Bill 1758 and Bill 3579. Okay, I'm Jim Blake. I'm the legislative chairman for the Propane Gas Association in New England. We represent 725 members. And I'm also a district manager for Eastern Propane, located just about 20 minutes north of here in Danvers, Massachusetts. We did speak last year when the Bill 1758's prior version came up, and I just want to speak in opposition on a few items, which is customers in the propane industry do have a choice on who they want to do business with, very similar to an oil company. There are a lot of suppliers out there. Consumers choose on how they want to do business with individual companies. Some companies supply tanks on a loan basis based on contractual obligations. Those contractual obligations generally would cover either installation costs, capital costs, and ongoing service requirements for a return on an investment by a company. Or consumers can choose to make that investment on their own up front and purchase equipment. As the previous speaker had mentioned, only 4 to 5% of the consumers choose to purchase their own equipment. There are some companies that is their only way of doing business, is if a consumer purchases equipment. Most people choose not to own their own equipment due to the potential changing regulations within the state regarding the NFPA 58 and 54, which are adopted in different versions throughout the states. Now we use NFPA 1 as part of our comprehensive fire code, where those regulations fall. So, consumers, propane is also delivered in a variety of quantities, and there's actually very similar to water or milk. You know, when somebody wants to buy a small quantity, we have a fixed cost in many cases to deliver the product, the cost of the equipment, and the cost of the personnel, whether they're going to drop off 10 gallons of fuel or whether they're going to drop off 250 or 1,000 gallons of fuel. So the pricing structure, trying to post prices on an internet, you know, or on a daily basis, is very cumbersome and unrealistic because of the variety of ways it can be delivered or the way it can be used. And those things are usually laid out up front again under contracts. Things like annual minimum usage that are mentioned in here, they address the return. For instance, if somebody wants to have a piece of equipment at their house, they might choose to either rent a tank, they could choose to purchase a tank, rent a tank, or go under an annual minimum use. Those are personal choices. And again, if they choose not to purchase or not to rent, and then they decide not to use fuel that they purchased, okay, the company, you know, there can be an individual thing. I will say most companies, you know, certainly work with a customer. Nobody wants to do business with an unhappy customer. So, the other thing is some of the things in 3579 address costs, and that would shift longtime propane customers that have been using it for a long time, that would shift costs on the front end, or on the, excuse me, to the back end on a lot of customers, and it wouldn't be fair to the existing customers that are currently in place. You've been here a long time, I don't need to keep going on. I think you get the gist of it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your testimony. Looking forward to working with you on this.
Thank you, and yeah, any kind of committee or something, we're certainly happy to sit on and work on.
Great. Looking forward to it. Thank you very much. Next, Steve Dodge. Steve is going to be followed by Mary from Climate Action Brooklyn, whose last name begins with the letter D. Mary? Mary Devratt? Nope, go ahead. After you, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had submitted written testimony for the record. My name is Stephen Dodge. I'm director of the Massachusetts Petroleum Council. As you know, our members engage in the oil and natural gas business. I'm here today in opposition to Senate Bill 1781, which would ban hydraulic fracturing in the state. There are about 4 or 5 other bills, similar bills, that are over in the Natural Resources Committee. And I have to say at the outset that none of that, no hydraulic fracturing, no treatment of frack waste will ever happen in Massachusetts. Our state geologist, who takes no position on fracking, has repeatedly stated that there are no recoverable natural gas reserves in Massachusetts. The DEP, in a letter to the boards of health, said that, quote, hydraulic fracturing is not a concern for Massachusetts since productive hydrocarbons do not exist in New England, end quote. And class 2 injection wells, which were also referenced in the bill, also are already banned in Massachusetts. So please bear in mind that a lot of what you have heard on this issue, and I'm sure what you'll hear in the future, is just plain false. In recent years, technological advances that combine safe hydraulic fracturing and innovative horizontal drilling have allowed the United States to take over as the world leader in natural gas production. And the air is cleaner because of it. And domestic oil produced by fracking has led to a dramatic lowering of crude imports, which has helped lower prices at the pump. A decade ago, environmental groups advocated for natural gas as the fuel of choice for new power plants. Their advocacy was influential in energy restructuring legislation that led to a dramatic increase in the number of plants operated by natural gas. The demand for natural gas skyrocketed. Today, 50% of New England electricity generation is powered by natural gas compared to just 15% in 2000. Their argument was that natural gas was cleaner and would help combat global warming, and that is exactly what has happened. Mr. Chairman, I don't have to remind you that you and your colleagues have spent many hours this session trying to put the pieces together and try to figure out a way to lower energy costs. And the common denominator throughout all those hours and hours of hearings is the need for additional gas supplies. It's not the only piece of the puzzle, but it's an important piece. And study after study has demonstrated the need for additional gas supplies, and businesses and residents of the state are clamoring for it. They are tired of paying some of the highest natural gas and electricity prices in the country. And where are those additional natural gas supplies coming from? In fact, where is most of our natural gas coming from now? Marcellus shale gas produced safely through hydraulic fracturing. It is disingenuous to, on the one hand, tout the need for additional clean burning and greenhouse gas producing natural gas supplies, knowing that most of that gas will be Marcellus shale frack gas on the one hand, and on the other hand support bills that would send the message that while we want the gas, we don't like the way it's produced. That is really biting off our nose to spite our face. Anyone who suggests that we can stay competitive, lower our sky-high energy costs, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and meet our energy needs for the foreseeable future with wind and solar alone is quite frankly putting their head in the sand. We cannot say no to everything. We need wind, solar, hydro, and natural gas. And the fact of the matter is, natural gas as part of that puzzle will be primarily produced through hydraulic fracturing, but not in Massachusetts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Dodge. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Joseph Toole.
chairman and the rest of the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utility, and
That'd be
Energy.
me.
Nice to meet you. My name is Joseph Schulin. I am a petitioner of Senate Bills S. 1791, an act establishing a transformative motion utilities law, and S. 1792, an act to provide a blackout battery backup. I'm in support of S. 1971 and S. 1792 for providing valuable statewide emergency response energy resources for all electric energy subscribers and to support the development of the transformative energy community throughout the entire Commonwealth. I am here today at public hearing to testify that there are no planned changes to the text of this bill by the petitioner. I am in support of S. 1791 and S. 1792, and I urge the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy to support a favorable report to pass for S. 1791 and S. 1792. Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
testimony and your patience. We look forward to working with you on it as we consider the bill. Thank you very much. Rich Cowan? Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of folks who have signed up to testify. If any of you would seek to testify, please don't hesitate to do so. Mr. Cowan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Rich Cowan. I'm representing Drayton Pipeline Awareness Network. In the rush to natural gas, myself and many of my neighbors were kind of woken up at the beginning of last year to learn that gas pipeline infrastructure would be placed in our town. An enormous amount of pipeline infrastructure, so much that entire neighborhoods that our town depends on for its revenue and its tax base are no longer going to be able to be used for the purpose that our planners intended if these pipelines go through. And therefore, I wanted to speak in support of HB 3534 for a study of the North Energy Direct project. But I would like to suggest an amendment to this because I think that there's some misconception about what the need for gas is and what the problem is. And unfortunately, that misconception has been promulgated by lobbyists associated with Kinder Morgan and certain members of the gas industry. Gas, although it's relatively inexpensive, is not a storable fuel. In other words, it's not easy to store, at least not in the geology in New England. In Nova Scotia, in Ohio, and Pennsylvania, there's underground cavern sites where you can store natural gas, seasonal storage, so that natural gas will be available in the winter or when it's very cold, when New England needs it a lot. And our problem is that all of our utilities are contracting for storage of gas in the Midwest in a place where, in order to ship it, the pipelines are relatively highly utilized, highly constrained. And in order to properly address the issue of the pipeline, I think that the issue has to be addressed with the other pipeline projects that are in progress so that people understand the big picture. Specifically, there's 5 other potential ways to deliver additional gas to the area, most of which do not require any construction of new pipelines at all. There's the Portland Natural Gas Project. There are smaller expansions of the Spectra line. There's the use of the storage caverns that are being constructed now in Nova Scotia as seasonal gas storage. There's contract requirements on the Iroquois pipeline system, which are already interested in England. And if you permit the study's scope to be broadened, you will see that the demand, the calls for 2.2 billion cubic feet of additional gas capacity are way beyond what the region could need. I have submitted to the committee 6 copies of this piece, which talks about all the competing natural gas projects that are in New England, and 6 copies of the second piece that lists the proposed natural gas export terminals in Canada, in eastern Canada. And if this issue of the pipeline, the issue of energy demands during the winter can be addressed in conference, I think that the policymakers will see that what we need to do is work on the storage issue to avoid the need to spend billions of dollars in pipelines and billions of dollars in new transmission. Not only storage of natural gas for the winter, but also battery backup storage, in other words, grid-scale batteries like Tesla and Levo have developed, which will enable the regions that now are facing lower amounts of generation to actually store energy during the day and be able to handle those peak hours during the day without addition of lots of new pipelines and lots of new power plants. Any committee has any questions? We have many members, some of whom, like myself, have an engineering background. We'd be happy to address specifics of how to incorporate the changes that I've suggested. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. As I said, that brings us to the end of those who signed up to testify. You did? 14.
Makeup, Van Musica.
I
The sheet is still out
thought
there.
you were married, but yeah, come on up.
You thought I was married?
I thought it was Mary and I you wrote it for maybe.
Oh.
From
Makeup.
Brookline?
Nope.
Oh.
I think the sheet's still out there.
All right, well, have a seat. Belly up to the bar.
Still up. Low seats. Okay. So my name is Makeup Van Musica. I'm a former Cambridge City Councilor. I'm a member of Mothers Out Front, or the Green Decade, which is an environmental group in Cambridge, founding member of Cambridge Eco, Environmental Citizens Organization, and a proud graduate of BU School of Public Health. So I come to the issues of climate change through the public health impact. So as you heard the professor from BU talk about methane converts at the ground level to ozone, which is a health hazard for people, increases asthma, as you heard. It also damages trees, the methane leaks damage trees. So I'm here to talk about the bill that talks about requiring that the loss of gas is not included in the ratepayer calculations, and also requiring that there be a coordination between municipalities and the gas companies. So I was also a funder of the study that he did, and you heard a little talk about that, to look at the leaks in Cambridge and Somerville. That was the initial study. And before they did the study, they, as a good study, they tried to hypothesize how many leaks there would be. And they did it based on the amount of the age of the pipes, as far as I knew, and the amount of miles of gas pipeline that were under each of the two cities. So after the conclusion of the study, there were half as many leaks in Cambridge as there were in Somerville, which is a town that's about the same age and they're in proximity. And the reason for that is Cambridge has a very solid policy of any time the streets are opened up to having not just gas companies, but all the utilities come in and do the repairs at the same time to minimize the street repaving. And to me, that just jumped out as proof that this kind of cooperation really will help to more swiftly bring down the leaks and make the cost a little bit more bearable. It was interesting to be here when the industry spokesman spoke, and he sort of fumbled on the question that you asked him about gas repairs, and to me, he actually seemed to agree with you that it was a good thing that when the streets are opened up, the utilities had an opportunity to repair those leaks. So hopefully that bill will pass favorably, both of those bills will pass favorably out of committee, and I do hope that this committee will also favorably pass the bill that will not have the gas leak loss be incorporated in the rates that ratepayers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I appreciate it. With that, we're at the end of everyone who's testified or seek to testify. Would anyone else like to testify before the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy, hearing on nuclear energy, gas leaks, towing, and other miscellaneous topics? Seeing none, this hearing of the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy closed. Anything happen in the House today?
I was down here all the time.
I know, I've been here for 4 hours. We need to go read the bill and write a bill.